Breasticles away. Oh, and we're live. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A little bit later than advertised. This is the Mr. and Mrs. B's Brain Dump discussion about the proposed changes to the CBT. If you haven't already seen the proposed changes, then I'm going to do a short summary of them in a moment. I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to get my shit together because we've been really late getting back from dinner and we haven't managed to get any of our shit together. So that's what I'm going to do right now while people join us. So bear with me a moment.
Okay, so have you started Skype and sent out a link?
No, because I didn't know that you weren't actually logged into logged into there. Right, that's that one.
Do you want me to help with that bit?
No, I'm gonna. Right, so anyone on Skype who's part of the Hangout bunch, anyone who's in that group, if you want to join us, I'm going to put the link in there right now.
That won't work. You have to do. It's changed.
Oh, it's changed. Okay, what do I need to do?
Click on the little face at the top.
Click on the little face.
Yeah. Highlight that link. Copy that one.
Copy that one.
That one.
Ah, sneaky, sneaky.
Yeah, sneaky motherfuckers.
Okay. Right.
Oh, it might be worth pointing out whilst we get our shit together that it is. Nobody can see what I'm talking about. Tonight is kind of Mrs. B's birthday, and also it's Mother's Day, and both of those qualify for Mrs. B. That's why we're a little bit late getting back. So therefore, I hope you understand why we're so late starting.
I've already mentioned that the reason that we're late is because our taxi driver was late.
And your birthday. Did you mention that?
No, I didn't mention that.
Okay. Did you mention Mother's Day?
No, I didn't.
Okay, so I think I covered it all then. That's brilliant. Do you want
Thanks, darling.
Would you like a drink?
I would love one, thank you.
That like a be a B&T?
Yes, that would be awesome.
Is there any for the crowd in?
No.
It'll be a short hangout then.
It will be a short hangout. Okay, so the format that I'm proposing that we take for tonight, while I'm waiting for everyone to join us, just people watching, I'm going to have to go over this again, so apologies for saying this more than once, but what I'm proposing is that I will give the subject that is going to be discussed, the proposal by the government, and then each person on the panel will have 2 minutes to air their opinions on that. After their 2 minutes are up, I will call time and we'll move on to the next person, and so on until we've covered all of, well, pretty much all of the issues, and then we'll open it up to debate, so interaction and chatter between all of the participants is the plan. You all know that's not going to happen. Okay. Is anyone even planning to join me, or is it just me in here? Come bike will be a couple of minutes. Weggy is talking about a new bike. Weggy, dude. I'm just going to type Weggy, dude. Dude. Get in the hangout. Mrs. B's got makeup on and shit, and I've also got a huge spot there. Can you see that? See that?
What's all that there?
My big spot.
You got a big spot?
Look.
I don't think it's got. Actually, that's not very big at all, is it?
It's huge. It feels huge. It feels massive. You know, one of them that's like,
oh,
it's
God,
not that big.
I started getting a complex because every time he told me it felt massive. Hang on,
She was lying.
She's lying. It's not that massive at all. Right.
Oh no, I'm going to. What have you done with this camera?
Nothing. Leave it alone.
Do you know?
Anyway, yeah. So we just got back from here now, and apologies for being late because we've got kids and birthdays and all sorts of things.
Oh, when you come Suffolk Andy, all right, darling?
It's Suffolk Andy. Let's let him get his headphones in first.
We can't even hear us
that
yet.
bloody mother.
So hello, girls and boys.
What?
Did you have a nice meal out for Mummy's Day?
We really did.
Awesome.
You've got all your wallpaper, all your war paint on, girl.
I have.
You have.
Yeah, she's
Been
totally-
All right, I'm not looking at you at all, mate.
yeah, any Cowboys tonight, mate, they're all dead.
Are they? Oh, so you had a good time, you two.
Punching above his weight.
Punching above his weight. Oh, poor old boy.
Not sure about that.
So, are they going to have this debate tonight, or are we just going to not bother, or?
Well, I mean, we're going to have a chat about it.
Well, I was hoping, the plan is, and I'm really sorry that we started late, that's entirely my fault for not having my plan today.
And not announcing it or anything.
Not announcing it and all the things that I said I was going to do on Thursday because I forgot. But basically what I'm going to do is go through the proposals, like 5 or 6 of them, then put all of the proposals out to everyone on the panel. You all get 2 minutes to talk about your thoughts on each of the proposals. We'll do a proposal, 2 minutes each, proposal, 2 minutes each, and then we'll have a bit of a debate about them all. That's the plan.
But we can extend it to next weekend as well.
Oh, God, yeah.
And be slightly prepared as well.
Yeah,
I think it's got to the 21st of May or something, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, we've got plenty of time.
Yeah, there's time. There's time, but
I did have a little read up about it and sort of looked at some statistics and stuff. So
Andy's prepared. That's awesome.
Good.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know that last year, in the last 12 months, there was only 504 under-19s took their test in Great Britain.
You are joking.
As in the full-blown test.
Full-blown test, there's 504 under-19s took their test. So 90% drop.
That's ridiculous.
Staggering. Staggering. Yeah.
500 for the entire UK is ridiculous.
504 for the last 12 months in the whole of the UK.
Yeah.
Good evening, chappies. Welcome to Richard, Mr. Calm Biker, and to the Yorkshire Biker, whose name I've completely forgotten or don't actually know.
Yorkshire Biker.
Do we have a first name, or is it Yorkshire Biker?
Do we have a preferred name, or are you?
Or should we call him the Fighting Yorkshire Biker?
Oh dear.
The what?
The Fighting Yorkshire Biker. You haven't seen his video?
No.
Oh, he gets a good smack on the head. Yeah.
Starting fights.
Yeah.
Look, there was only I could only be calm for so long, couldn't I?
Yeah.
Well done, Richard. Oh, got breast issues. Apologies. Right, so now there's a few of us here. So the plan is I'll whiz through the executive summary of the document, which I have linked below the Hangout, and then talk through the high-level proposals, and everyone gets a couple of minutes to talk about their thoughts on them, if that's okay. Any objections?
Where's Skeggy?
That's not an objection.
Okay.
Don't worry, we can do more of these. This is meant to be a kick-off, but you know.
Okay, mate.
It's meant to have been far better planned. So the proposals under consideration are the structure and content of the CBT, the qualification process for instructors, and the standards checks for instructors. So the government are welcoming views on the proposals to align the training with the National Standard for Driver and Rider Training Framework, which I believe is the one that was forced on us by Europe. To ensure training is tailored to suit the individual learning needs and the skill levels of each trainee. I think that would be quite interesting. Improve public knowledge about the CBT and improve awareness of what learner riders can expect from their instructor. Revise the standards check so that it supports a risk-based approach to quality assurance and earned recognition from good trainers, which they can use to promote and endorse their skills, and revise the qualification process for motorcycle instructors. The government would also welcome your views on a number of potential longer-term proposals, some of which may require regulatory changes. If you would like to suggest any additional changes or improvements to the motorcycle training regime, it would be helpful if you could supply evidence to support your ideas. Please bear in mind when replying to this part of the paper that regulatory changes cannot take place as quickly as they are subject to parliamentary timescales and procedures. So what we're looking at initially is those changes to the CBT, because they are not governed by Europe. They do not have to go through Parliament because of the way that it's all structured.
Mhm.
Now, we know that there are massive problems with the way the whole motorbike, from being a not rider to being a rider, is structured. And I personally would argue that actually it's a very safe way of learning to ride a bike is that you go through certain levels so that you can't go from being a novice, having never ridden a bike, to jumping straight on a super-powered bike. However, the same thing doesn't apply to cars, but that's not what we're here to discuss today. What we're here to discuss today are the proposed changes to the CBT. So, the first proposal is to align the training with the national standard for driver and rider training framework and develop training materials to reflect those standards. Now, I haven't had a chance to look at the national standards for driver and rider training framework. Has anyone else?
I've looked at everything else, but I haven't seen any of that.
So, the national standards.
Oh, it was there. I saw it.
Yeah. National standard for riding mopeds and motorcycles, or Category A. Okay. So this is what you need to pass. So performance standards for Section 1.1, you must be able to assess your own physical, emotional and other needs and those of any others who intend to make the journey with you and decide whether it's suitable to use the machine for the journey. So you need to know whether you're in a fit state and your passenger's in a fit state to make the journey.
That's right. Yeah.
Wiggly lines, bitches!
Hey, yeah, I kill people. Yeah. So there's that.
Okay, so I'm just going to pop a link to this because it's actually quite a long document. And I'll pop a link to this. Hang on.
Do we really need to get that in depth right now, though? Just thinking.
Well, it's kind of related to the first proposal.
Are you fit to ride?
Well, that's the first thing. So, we'll come back to that one then. And the next proposal is ensure training is tailored to suit the individual learning needs and skill levels of each trainee. This includes theoretical knowledge and ensuring that during the on-road ride, trainees have demonstrated their competence to ride unaccompanied.
That's the fucking big one.
So, we'll start with that one.
This is down to the trainer to ensure that the training is appropriate for the rider, or is it just kind of generic and even though you keep falling off you can just pass anyway type thing? So
what are your thoughts? And I'm going to start with Suffolk Andy because he was first in the hangout. So Andy, what are your thoughts on this? They want to make sure that training's tailored to suit the individual learning needs and skill of each trainee. What do you think?
Well, it's pretty obvious that everybody has got a different level of fitness or confidence or having a little bit of savvy. The only thing I can tell you, I've had 3 boys go through this, and they all came back and told me that 1 or 2 people weren't fit to ride a push and go. Yeah. And what was happening was that after the end of the day's training, they had to come back the next day to finish it off, where everybody, you know, who passed it were sent away with their certificate. But these folks had to come back and do a couple of 3 hours the next day to get their certificate until they passed. So that proves that the instructors where my boys went down here in Ipswich weren't just passing them off just for the sake of passing them off. They were bringing them back and making them do another couple of hours. What they got up to in that couple of hours I can't tell you because my boys weren't there. But that just shows that they're not just passing them off just to make the money and Scarborough and run. So,
yeah.
So do you think there's a need for any changes? Do you think it's good enough as it is, or do you think anything needs to change?
What, on the whole thing, or
just in terms of the way the training's delivered? Do you think the way it is currently is sufficient to suit the needs of everyone, from someone who's never ridden a bike like I was when I did my CBT to someone who's going and taking the CBT for the 17th time?
No, I don't. I think that should be tailored more to the individual and not as a broader thing, because human beings are all different. We all think different. We're all physically different. We've all got mental differences, and maybe a broad test like this is not for everybody. So maybe they should look more into the individual to see what sort of person they are or what confidence they've got before they put them on a moped.
Okay, so we're going to go to the Yorkshire Biker next. Thank you very much, Suffolk Andy, for that. Yorkshire Biker, what are your thoughts on this one then?
I think personally it would help if the training was more suited for each individual. So I mean, last time I did my CBT, I've done it twice now. But the instructor I went with last time, there were 3 of us, and all 3 learnt completely different ways. I mean, I weren't as stable going out cones and everything, but I had better road positioning and more awareness out on the actual ride. So, but I think at the minute they make it, obviously it's basic training, so they don't want to alter it too much. And it seems that they're just passing, well, the company that I did it with, they seem to just be passing as many people as they could so that they got sort of a better name for themselves.
And we'll come on to that. We'll come on to the pass rates and the quality of the training. But, in terms of what's actually covered in the training, do you think what's covered in the training as far as the theory stuff, so what the road signs mean, because you don't have to do, for anyone who doesn't know, you don't have to do your theory test, you don't have to know your highway code to do your CBT. You can jump on a bike not really knowing the difference between a red and a green light. So do you think that that's sufficient? Do you think that the CBT instructors are sensible enough and have enough common sense to say you do know the difference between a red and a green light, you do know when you approach a roundabout you're supposed to stop, and when you see one of them triangle stop signs you stop? Do you think that's enough?
I'm not too sure. I mean, I know I did get asked a couple of questions on what various signs were to see if you do actually know a little bit. Whether they all do that or not, I'm not too sure. It seemed enough for me, but it's hard to say for each person, innit? So.
Yeah. Sorry, that was a really tough question to put to you. I'm sorry. But it would be nice to get more opinions on that. So if anyone watching, if you want to pop any questions or comments in the Q&A, that'd be really appreciated. Thank you very much, Yorkshire Biker. We're going to go to Richard next. Calm Biker.
Hello.
Hello.
On those 2 points, on the first one about whether training should be tailored to the individual, well, that's kind of a given, isn't it?
Yeah.
You would hope that that's already happening, and it should already be happening. And I'm guessing that somebody somewhere has been complaining. I know the one I went to, a similar thing to what Yorkshire Biker was saying, that there were people there who clearly could not ride, who still got a certificate. I got a certificate at the end of my one and only CBT telling me that I could go off and buy a bike. And because of the type of person I am, I thought, I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think because I've never been on a bike before. So I literally got there at 10 in the morning, left at 2 with a certificate. And I didn't think that was good enough. But that's just me kind of being self-critical. So I would imagine there's been some complaints, and that is making the government say, well, we need to put this in writing, even though it should be obvious to even the most brain-dead moron. On the other point, though, on the one about the theory, this is the kind of the biggest point I would make, is that I believe you should have to take the theory test before you're allowed on the road. End of story.
Sorry, Richard. You should or you should not? You
should.
Right, okay.
You absolutely should. I was watching a video earlier today, and the guy won't do anything particularly wrong, but and I won't say it was because I won't want to give him any embarrassment, but he put out a video where he actually said, is what I'm doing illegal? And it wasn't, although he was at risk from traffic officers for certain things.
Yeah.
But the fact that somebody could not know that what he was doing was potentially illegal or not, and the thing he was doing was actually something that most of us do every day, shows that there's not enough knowledge out there of the highway code.
I could probably make an educated guess as to what he was doing.
Well, it was overtaking in the white hatched areas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to suggest filtering, but yeah. not a million miles off.
Yeah. And that just shows that there's a problem there. I mean, it goes further than that. I don't know whether to bring in other things yet, or I'll leave it for when you get to them. But
no, go for it, and then I'll say if I expect that we're gonna cover that in other sections. Go on.
Well, there was stuff on there. I mean, my aim would be actually to get people to do the full test, if I had any control over it. The CBT was designed, and its stated aim of the CBT, to get you to a point where you can go and practice, so that you can take your test. Not to get you to a point where you can go and buy a bike and just do it every 2 years for the rest of your life. That's not what it's for, but that's what people are using it for.
That's one of the key things. That's one of the reasons that this consultation's come out, because they want more people to take their full bike test, but the problem is, because of the European laws that were applied a couple of 2 years ago, is it, about the levels of bike that engine CCs that you can ride depending on your age and experience and everything else. Yeah. So rather than allowing people to just do their CBT every 2 years, I mean, one of the proposals, which we'll come to, is to make it an annual thing, which personally I think is ridiculous. But we'll talk about that one a bit later. So yeah, you're absolutely right, Richard. The whole idea was not to make it an end in and of itself. It was to make it a bit easier to do bike tests.
That's right, because you can't. You know, it's not as easy to go out and practice with a friend like you can in a car. You know, you can go out with your boyfriend, girlfriend, wife, husband, parents,
father, grandparents,
and you can't do that on a bike. So without a CBT, and that doesn't seem to be encouraged either. It seems to me a really good idea to encourage people on L plates to go and ride with people who've done the test.
Exactly.
But that doesn't seem to get encouraged at all.
You got to remember, you got to remember as well. This CBT came in 1990.
It's a long time ago, isn't it?
It's a long while, and everything has to evolve. And I think it's time that did evolve, because road conditions are certainly different from 1990 to 2015. There's been a big change. They're more busier and whatever, and more traffic. And it is time that they did look at this, but and it's a big but. The people who are looking at this have got to know motorbikes.
Yes.
And a lot of them who look at this have no idea. So, you know, they need to have people on board who actually know motorbikes. And maybe then we can bring this up and make it safer for everybody on this CBT.
Well, hopefully that's why they're inviting comment, so they can actually get the views, and hopefully people like Mag are involved. But yeah, the other point I was going to make before kind of move on, just to see whether it is going to be included or not in this, but the CBT covers so little.
Yes.
It basically, can you get around without crashing into something? And actually, I mentioned before on the CBT I went on, there was a girl who still got a certificate and clearly couldn't. But there's nothing about positioning. There's not enough about positioning on the direct access. Or any full bike test. There's not enough about position. There's not enough about reading the road and understanding what it means to be on the road. So you see people, you see your Royal Jordanians as well do filter like mad and do it generally relatively safely. And then you see people trying to emulate them on L plates, and they're not considering all the things that are going on around you that you pick up by the riding or driving for a long time. So you watch the video of somebody filtering down the right-hand side of traffic, and you're thinking, you're going through the oncoming traffic's filtering lane, you're passing a junction on your right-hand side that somebody could have come out of, those lights up ahead have been red for a while and are about to go green and you haven't realised. All these things that you only get from experience and a certain level of teaching. And you're never going to get that with 2 hours on the road, if you get the 2 hours on the road.
Yeah,
so
and
there's so much that I think needs changing.
I think the thing is that everything that's covered, if you've ever looked at the CBT syllabus versus the Mod 1 and Mod 2 syllabus for the big bike, and then if you look at it for the A1 and A2, the two-parter, if you're doing the staged access, actually the syllabus is exactly the same. You're just doing it on progressively bigger engine bikes. So yeah, anything that is included in the syllabus or excluded from the syllabus in the case of what Richard was talking about is fair play for discussion, because if it's not in the CBT, chances are it's not in your Mod 1 or your Mod 2, it's not in your A1 or your A2. So we need to talk about that as well. So yeah, absolutely, Richard, that's totally up for discussion. So thank you for raising it. And thank you very much, Richard, and welcome to Keith. I think you've finished now, haven't you, sweetie?
Hello, Mrs. B.
Hello.
It's their bowl of cornflakes.
You're looking hot.
Thank you, darling.
Not that you don't look hot anyway.
I don't normally, but I have got a bit.
Got a bit of glam on tonight.
Bit of slap on tonight. Yeah, slap on tonight.
It's Mother's Day, and we've been out for my birthday, so I have.
It's a pity that Mr. B couldn't make himself look a bit more tidy. Look at the state of him.
Anyway, that aside, this isn't a normal.
He's taking his cap off.
This is not a normal hangout, Keith.
No, I do apologise.
So what we're discussing is the second proposal in the first document that I've linked to below the hangout, which is to ensure that training is tailored to suit the individual learning needs and skills of each trainee. This includes theoretical knowledge and ensuring that during on-the-road ride, trainees have demonstrated their competence to ride unaccompanied. And what I'm asking for is you to, in about 2 minutes, state your thoughts on that, please, if you could.
Well, I think as Andy just pointed out earlier, I mean, the CBT is quite an old test now, and I think it's well overdue a revamp. I mean, it seems ridiculous to me that you can, not really have any formal training, and yet you're allowed to go on the road for the best part of 2 years before you need to do it again. It just seems ludicrous, and yet compared to
training, it is formal training because it does follow a certain framework. In theory, you should have achieved certain competencies before you are awarded your certificate.
Yes.
And that is whether you achieve those and whether people check you to those levels of competence is for a separate part of this discussion. But in terms of how the training's delivered and whether it's tailored to individual needs, that's the bit that we want to talk about right now.
I think you're probably right. I mean, when I did my CBT, there was at least one other chap on that course that clearly couldn't manage to ride a motorbike, and luckily for him, really, the school that I with said to him, took him to one side, look, so you're just not ready for this. I'm not prepared to stick my neck out. Give you a certificate for you then to go on the road and kill yourself, down the road. So I think there's got to be a level of competency before anybody's given permission to ride on the road, and whether that's increasing the standard on the CBT or not, but I think certainly it's something at that level. I mean, and we've talked about before where depending on who you're with, there's a definite different level of training that's given by CBT providers. I know the one that I went on, they were very, very thorough. They gave some classroom work to do, and we talked about road positioning, road signs, all that malarkey, as well as learning to control and ride a motorcycle, which I thought was very, very good. Because up to that point I hadn't. I'd been on a bike when I was 18, but other than that, I'd not ridden a bike since I was 40, until I was 40. So there was a good period of time when I wasn't riding a bike. So without that, I wouldn't have had the confidence to then get on a bike and then go out on my own, really. So that's my thoughts on it, really.
Okay, thank you very much, Keith. Much appreciated. I'm going to go to Mr. B next. Mr. B, what are your thoughts? And please, I want to talk about my experiences, so try not to cross over too much if you don't mind.
It's difficult for me because I've obviously not done a CBT for a long
Well, you've never done one.
Time.
You've never done a CBT, have you?
I think I did.
No, you did. You passed your bike test before CBTs were introduced. They were introduced in 1990. You passed your bike test in 1980.
Yeah, it's not good.
4, 5.
He's never done one.
So you've never done one.
He's like me. He's never done one.
But yeah, so it is difficult for me to answer because I don't know what actually goes on in terms of tailoring. I mean, obviously, I got your feedback from your thing, and the fact about not even teaching how to use a clutch was, well, it outraged me, to be honest. So I guess that there is an element there, and I'd have to see the syllabus.
Syllabus, I've shown you.
And I'm not sure that covers clutch control, but
No, it doesn't.
Before it doesn't.
Well, it kind of does. It touches on it, but it's like everything. The assumption from the syllabus is that they put a one-liner in to say that the trainee will understand what a clutch is. The trainee will understand how to effectively use a clutch in various situations, including uphill and downhill.
But you said that you went through it without any clutch.
Exactly.
Right.
But that's what I'm going to come to. That's what I'm going to come to.
But yeah, I think the main thing is that the big gap for me is that this it's difficult because the typical subject here is ensure the training is tailored to suit the individual needs and everything else. I don't think it's actively enforced and ensure that those individuals that need that, because everyone here has said that people have been falling off their bikes and everything else. So obviously they need some focused training there. If they keep falling off the bike, there's a bit of an issue there. But obviously that doesn't seem to happen in this class anyway. So the thing that I find.
You get 2 minutes, sweetie.
I know. I'm just going to finish up. The big gap here, and how we can get to this point, is what happened to the standard knowledge that you need to be able to ride on the road. Like, what does a red light mean? What does a green light mean? If we can't, we're not covering that right now. But
that's the problem. There is no baseline. There is no baseline.
Yeah, and as far as I'm concerned, you should know the rules of the road before you can ride on your own.
And this is where we fall into the same category as Richard is, in that we believe that you shouldn't have to do you should have to do your theory test before you do your CBT.
Yeah, what's a train crossing, for Christ's sake? What's a red light?
Ding ding, time up, my turn. Okay, thank you, Mr. B.
Thanks.
Some of the people watching, some people who know me, will know that I've recently done my CBT. It was less than 18 months ago. And if I don't hurry up and get my full bike licence, I'll have to do it again soon. My CBT took place in Runcorn. I won't say who the instructors were, but after the end of the first day, I said to the instructor, I am not fit to go and take a 125 out on my own. And the instructor went, I think if I'd said to the instructor, do you know what, I messed up here, I messed up there, but I know what I did wrong, I'll be all right. I strongly believe that that instructor would have gone, yeah, all right, and given me the certificate. But I said, no, I want to come back and I want to do it again. I went back, I did a second day because, again, a little bit about me, I have driven a car for years, but I've only ever driven an automatic. I don't know anything at all about clutch gears. I don't understand listening, or didn't understand listening to the engine, listening to when the gear needs to change. Never understood any of that. Consequently, the whole thing with the bike, a whole new thing for me. So after a second day on the bike, right at the end of my ride, I messed up big time, and I'm talking about FUBAR bindi. Anyone who knows the acronyms, it was properly FUBAR bindi. And how I got my certificate at the end of that day, I don't know, because if I'd have been in the CBT instructor's position, I would have said, you know what, you've still not got enough confidence, you can't go out on a 125 if you're going to behave like that. But he gave it to me, and I didn't argue, and he said to me, promise me you're not going to go out and buy a 125 and jump straight on it. And if you promise me that, I'll give you your certificate.
So he wanted you to promise that you wouldn't ride a motorbike?
Yeah.
In return, he would give you a certificate that allowed you to.
And
That's good.
I've talked in videos about what happened in that incident, and it was horrendous. And I've not even scratched the surface of what actually happened. And this was a one-to-one CBT instruction. This was tailored to me. This was all about me. It wasn't like we had half a dozen other people on the training with me. who I was trying to keep up with. This was just me. And that leads on to some of the other issues that we're going to talk about, but I've totally done my 2 minutes. So I'm just going to move to some of the comments. And Bex88, who we know, hi Bex, we know you've recently passed your test, and congratulations. Bex did her lessons in a CBT with a school, and she said that they feel that a cut-down theory test as a separate half day prior to the actual on-site and on-road elements would be far safer and far more successful. And I think that's a really sensible proposal. But maybe
it's hard to see how they would cut it down, to be honest, because there's not much to cut.
No.
Yeah, well, we could cut it down. I just like to do the full thing.
And Weggy says he's much in favour of strengthening the CBT, as he believes it's not enough by today's standards. But I have to say that when on the likes of myself, both Andy and Skeggy never had to do anything at all apart from getting a 50cc bike minute in the road. And yes, there is the argument that there is a generation of people who just jumped on bikes and went wheeling under bridges when the instructor around the clipboard. We've all heard that story, sweetie.
Surely not.
We never even had instructors. We just got on and rid of 250 straight away.
Do you know what? If riding a bike entailed doing the CBT, the Mod 1 and the Mod 2 before you're even able to ride a bike, I wouldn't have been too disappointed. Because if that was the process, I would have accepted it. You know what I mean?
But your CBT, your Mod 1 and your Mod 2 are all exactly the same thing. Different powered bikes, aren't they?
Yeah, it is, but it's no different than your driving test. I mean, you don't have lessons and then immediately jump in the car and drive around. You know, you wait till you've passed everything, you test, etc., before you're then competent enough to go out on the road on your own. And the bike test really shouldn't be any different than that, really, in my mind. I wouldn't have been disappointed if they said to me, well, the process is that you have to do your CBT, then you pass your CBT, then you go on to do your Mod 1 and your Mod 2. Then after that, then you're deemed capable of riding a motorcycle on the road. But I wouldn't have been disappointed at that. I would have accepted it.
We're training in between, like.
With training in between, without the ability to go out on my own on a motorbike, because if that was the process, then I would have accepted it, because kind of that's the process really when you're learning to drive, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, so I'm not saying it was a surprise to learn that the CBT, you take it and go, because I'd done some training when I was 18. I mean, it was a bit different then, so I knew you could do some training and then go out on the road on your own. But I wouldn't have been too disappointed to learn that they wouldn't allow me on the road until I've completed everything, because I would have accepted that was the way it was. But where it's significantly different from the car test is obviously that, you know, only having to pass a CBT then allows you to ride a bike on the road on your own, which from the outside looking in seems utter madness, doesn't it? But then again, you know, you've got some very good young riders that don't bugger around and are very sensible. So I suppose it's finding that balance, isn't it? Making the training,
the individualised training.
Yeah, making training robust enough.
If you've got someone who shows up for their training in a pair of jogging bottoms, trainers, tracky top, t-shirt, and you go, well, no, because quite a lot of people don't have all the gear when they do the CBT, and that's totally fine.
And they've stolen a bike to take their test as well?
No, because you go along for your CBT, you use someone else's bike, that's totally fair enough. So they turn up in the trackie and they go, yeah, no, this is fine for me to ride in because I'm only going to be going to my girlfriend's and to the Asda. Or they turn up and they go, right, what do I need to wear? What's the minimum level of safety that I need? What about CE marks? And that's the difference between the types of learners that you're going to get. Everyone's going to be different.
Yeah. I had to use the training school's gear. They wouldn't allow me on the road without the trousers, the jacket, the helmet, the gloves, and the boots. Period. If I'd turned up with that attitude, I know for certain they would have said, on your bike, lad, you're not coming on our training session with that kind of attitude. You either wear the gear, listen to what we've got to tell you, or you can clear off. And that was the attitude, really.
And to be fair to the first riding school I went with, the ones that awarded me my CBT, there was a lad who kept trying to go for ride outs with his instructor, and he kept turning up in a trackie and trainers, and the instructor went, I'm not fucking riding with him until he's got some proper gear on. But the way he did that was by saying, oh no, I'm just about to take a class out, or oh no, it's not a convenient time, rather than saying to him straight up, dude,
You're a dick.
put some proper gear on, because I am not being part of this. So that straight away set some alarm bells off for me, that they weren't prepared to say to their former pupils who they'd given CBT certificates to, dude, you need to be wearing proper gear. I know it's not the law, but if you want to come out with us, if you want to be associated with this riding school, because I've got my tabard on that says my riding school's name, I ain't going out if you've got your trackie on and your trainers.
One of the funniest things I came across was when I went back to my training school afterwards, and I've been back a few times to see them. I turned up with a tinted visor, and I remember one of the trainees saying to the instructor, "Well, I don't think he should be on a bike with a tinted visor." And the instructor turned around to him and said, "Listen, mate, while you're here doing your training, you wear the gear that we tell you to ride. Once you've done your test, it's up to you. That guy over there has done his test. If he chooses to wear a tinted visor, then that's his choice. But while you're here, you're right. You wear the gear that we insist on," which I thought was quite good as well.
But a tinted visor is quite different to.
I know, but you know what I mean. The point I was trying to make, the guy that was obviously being taught about riding and using the right gear, and obviously he raised the point that here's someone turning up who's on a proper bike, and in his mind, was turning up with something that appeared on the outside different from what he was being taught that he should ride with. So I thought that was quite good in some respects. I know a visor's different, but in the riding school, you weren't given a helmet with a tinted visor. You were given a helmet with a clear visor. You know what I mean?
That's kind of part of the course.
Yeah.
And I want to move on to section 2.4 of the consultation document, where it says, we believe it's important to raise learners' expectations, so that people taking the CBT, the expectation that trainers will, before the course begins, so before they even go near a bike, discuss with them what previous riding experience they have and adapt the individual training accordingly. So for me, I've driven for donkey's years, but I've never been on a bike, and I explained that I knew nothing about clutch control, which is quite important, as Mr. B's mentioned before. Nothing was covered about clutch control in my CBT. So in terms of, I know that Richard and the Yorkshire Biker and Keith have all taken their CBT fairly recently. How much of that was discussed with you guys before you got near a bike, starting with the Yorkshire Biker?
What was the question again, sorry?
So the question is, how much did they want to know about your previous riding experience before they let you near a bike? Did they ask you if you'd ridden a bike, what sort of bikes you'd ridden, what experience you had?
No, basically you just asked if I'd ridden a bike before, and that was it really.
And had you?
Yeah, I've done my CBT before that as well, and I'd rode a motocross bike on a field with Army as well, so I had a little bit of experience, but not a massive amount.
Okay, thank you very much. Richard?
Not really. I mean, they asked had I ridden a bike before, but I remember when we went out to the bikes for the first time, and there were 10 people to get on them. And I was saying, well, you can't give me a clue. I've never been on a bike. I don't know how you change gear. I don't, point at what the clutch is and give me a clue.
Yeah.
And there was, I mean, obviously I know how to use a clutch. I've been driving for, well, at the time I did my CBT, about 24 years or something, but I didn't know where it was. Why would I?
Exactly.
So yeah, it was a bit odd that, really. We recently went to another training school with Lisa she was thinking about doing a CBT, and they just said to her, they actually put her off. It was pretty poor, really. And they went down in my estimation, but they just said to her, have you ridden a bike before? No, I haven't. Okay, do you drive? No. Oh. And it was kind of, it was that, oh. And it was almost like, well, we're not interested unless you already drive or you already can ride. We're not interested. And it's just, it all seems a bit half-assed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had another word in mind.
Go on then, Mr. B. What's your thoughts on it?
Well, the CBT is just fucked up, really. It just allows anyone to come along and let's pretend that a person that has never driven a car before, never ridden a bike before, and they go and they say, I want to get on the road and I'm thinking about getting a bike. Okay, so you don't know anything about the road, you don't know anything about driving a car, you know nothing about what a clutch is, and the CBT does not have the syllabus to cover what that person would need to go out on the road.
You can argue that it does, though.
How?
Because if you look at the actual syllabus, then technically it does. It's down to the instructor.
Well,
and it puts the responsibility on the instructor to make sure that they've assessed the learner and assess the learner's knowledge to ensure that it's high enough.
Yes.
Well, look, you've got to remember with all of this, when you want to ride a motorbike or a bike or whatever, there's going to be a point for every single person who's never ridden a bike to actually ride one.
Mm.
Now, maybe these people who do this CBT, surely in their premises, they should have a part where learners for the very first time can get on a bike and ride up and down a certain piece off the road to get used to the gears or whatever, or clutch, until they're confident to go on the road. You can't just put somebody who's never been on a bike and say, let's go down the road. They should be a part of their premises where they can ride up and down a field or a bit of concrete or something, get used to that bike before they actually put them on the road with other motorists.
Yeah, and they do, and that's a good riding school. Even a poor riding school should at least have that.
Yeah.
I mean, when I went to my second riding school, the one who I'm going to do my DAS with, they told me, as they do, every riding instructor's got horror stories, but they told me of someone who their mother had paid for them to have lessons with them because they got their CBT after paying £120 for their CBT, which is a little bit higher than the national average, but they spent 2 hours in total for both parts of their CBT, so the theory and the slow riding round stuff and the on the road part. The entirety of it took 2 hours and they were awarded their certificate, but at the end of it this particular rider went, Mum, I haven't got a clue, and you know, you bought me this bike but I don't know what I'm doing, would you mind paying for some more lessons?
There's two parts to a CBT.
Well, there's the off-road and the on-road part.
It's
Like there is in
Mod 1 and Mod
Mod
2.
1 and Mod 2 in it.
So they do the highway code?
No. Well, and that's the bit that's open to interpretation. In the first part, they're supposed to sit down with you and say to you, have you ridden a bike? And this is your 2.4 to discuss what your previous riding experience is and adapt the training to you.
Let's go with the lowest common denominator. Let's say a person walks into a CBT and they say, have you ridden a bike before? You say, no.
Like I did.
Right, so what's the format there then?
So then it's, do you drive a car?
No.
Then it's, do you know anything about road safety?
Nope. No, nothing.
So at that point, they should be saying to you, I'm not saying that it happens, but they should be saying to you, right, we need to talk about the highway code.
But, yeah, does the legislation say that if the person walks into your office for a CBT...
The CBT syllabus does cover that. To be fair, the CBT syllabus, if followed to the letter, I would argue is sufficient, personally.
So the CBT syllabus says that even though you don't know what a red traffic light means and a green traffic light means, you can still ride on your own on a motorbike.
No. CBT syllabus says, as the instructor, if someone doesn't know the difference between a red light and a green light, you shouldn't let them on the bike until you've explained it to them.
It says that in the syllabus. If they don't
Not
know a red light,
explicitly. Not explicitly.
there we go. That's
I'm just looking down that. It says that that they should be able to understand key elements of the highway code.
should or must.
Should and key
well,
elements.
It says what must happen. Yeah, so they must understand the key elements of the highway code.
And how do
I
they?
think a lot of the problem is that the things that we're actually bringing up are not problems with the CBT necessarily, but problems with the way that the CBT is being undertaken by people.
Yeah.
And the instructors, which is something that we're going to come to about
Yeah.
down training and stuff.
I mean, if you could change the CBT as much as you like, but if the instructors don't follow it through because they just want to get the money and get you out there as quick as possible, then any change that anyone makes to the CBT is going to be a waste of time, isn't it? If they were following it to the letter right now, a lot of the things that we're talking about wouldn't be a problem. But I would still say that you'd need a theory test as opposed to this.
Yeah.
Do you know what a triangle sign means? You know, but
what they don't want to, what they're talking about with this consultation, is that they can't change any of the laws. They can't make it so that you have to do your theory test before you do your CBT. So they're trying to incorporate things into the CBT to make it safer.
Yeah.
To give riders a better understanding.
A better survival chance.
Yeah.
well, yeah. I mean, I suppose it's slightly telling that when I was at school and wanted to ride a bicycle to school, I had to do my cycling proficiency, which included more hours than the CBT.
Yeah, it's true. You used to go every week, didn't you, for a couple of 3 hours?
Yeah, about 2 or 3 hours a week for about 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a certificate. God knows where it is, but I've got a certificate.
You understand that doesn't let you ride a booster, don't you?
It's a bit different then. Pedals in those days, but no, there was a certificate. It was structured. There was a certificate at the end of it, and a fucking badge. For God's sake.
Well, do you know what? The whole cycling proficiency thing had gone by the time I was at school.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Is there no more?
I started school in 1985. I started infant school, and by the time I got to the age where you would ride a bike, it had stopped.
So that explains why cyclists these days ride through traffic lights that are red, and basically just piss everyone off.
They're just morons.
Not all cyclists. That's like, pedal cyclists. Not all of them, but the majority totally ignore the rules of the road.
It could do.
Because
maybe
cyclists
should have to do a CBT.
Because there's no more cycling proficiency test, which there should be, and I've passed mine. So there you go.
So you've got to remember. You've got to remember as well, when you going over the cars a little bit on this. There is a time when you go and say, "I want to drive a car." You get yourself a driving instructor, and he comes around, picks you up at your house, and takes you somewhere straight road, and you sit there for the very first time. You don't know nothing, and he will instruct you, and within 5 minutes of him telling you what to do, you're actually going up the road.
Mm-hmm.
I know he's sitting beside you, and the same basic should be for these instructors to do the same for these people on these bikes. They should instruct them properly before they put them on that road. And they should be, you can't just say, get on that bike and they follow me or I'll follow you. They've got to have a structured half day of training before they can take those people out on them bikes.
Which, thank you for that, Andy, because that leads us on to section 2.5 of the proposal, which says, we believe it will help instructors to focus additional training for those who need it most if they're able to sort trainees into groups depending on their competence. We acknowledge that this may be difficult for smaller schools that don't have the numbers of instructors and learners to allow for this. However, instructors can still conduct an assessment of the learner's skills before the course begins.
They can.
And again, the fact that this is open to consultation makes me quite cross, because people should be doing this as a matter of course.
Must.
In my opinion. What do you guys think? So coming to you, Suffolk Andy.
Well, yeah, I think that's going back to what we just said. These people, you're putting your life in their hands because they're your instructor. You wouldn't say to somebody, go and drive that plane without having somebody to show you, or drive that car, or whatever in life. So these people are in charge of you. So their training and this structure for this CBT should be structured for a novice who's never been on a bike, and he should be confident to go on the road with that instructor after he's been shown how to ride that bike. And that can't be on a road. It's got to be somewhere like a big parking lot or something, or, you know, and get to how to maneuver it and how to change gears and all this sort of stuff. It's that instructor who's the one who's in charge of your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Moving on to Keith.
Yeah, I mean, with mine, I mean, everybody, it didn't matter whether, because there was a couple of guys that they'd done a CBT before, and I think it was about to expire, but everybody, even before getting on the bike, were all shown the different aspects of the bike's controls, you know, the indicators, the headlight, the ignition, where the clutch was, where the brakes were, the throttle, and before we even allowed to even sit on the bike. So I thought that was quite good, because I hadn't got a clue. I mean, I didn't know which side the clutch was as opposed to the brake. Wouldn't have had a clue. And then once you'd gone through all that and you were confident enough about where the controls were, then it was onto the car part, where you began with, you know, the first gear. Then you do a couple of laps in first, and you say, right, okay, now try changing up to second gear, do a few laps, get comfortable with that. Then it was third gear. You know, obviously you couldn't go too fast on the car park, but it kind of built you up, going through the gears, doing some emergency stops, stopping and starting, going around a few corners. It was really, really good. And then after that, you got some instruction about, you know, roundabouts, signage on the roads, do's and don'ts, some rules, etc. He asked us some questions about the highway code, and that was the morning session. It was quite intense. And then after that, providing he was confident, because it was his reputation on the line, providing he was confident, you were confident enough to go out, then and only then would he take you out in the afternoon for the 2-3 hours that you spent on the road. But even going on the road, we'd stop and start somewhere, and he said, right, I wanted to do a U-turn for me. He did lots of things like that in preparation, I'm guessing, for the sort of mod 1 and then the mod 2. You know, kind of incorporated quite a few things, even in the CBT. It's really thought it was a full day, and by the end of it, I was absolutely knackered. I'd taken a lot in and learnt an awful lot. And going away from that, I was confident then to go to a bike shop and then order myself a 125, which is what I did. If at the end of that day I didn't feel confident enough, there's no way on earth I would have got on a bike after that. But it was really, really thorough. I mean, it's a shame that, you know, from what other people are saying, that other instructors aren't quite as thorough. But the guys that I with, it was about reputation as well. You know, they weren't prepared to take anyone out on that road unless they were confident, you were confident to go out on that road, and only then would they take you. And that's why I mentioned before, while that guy that was on the CBT, he was told, you know, quite gently and politely, that there was no way on earth he was ready to even go out on the road, and he was told that he should actually come back and do another session before they were prepared to take him out on the road. So that's what I think.
It seems to me, though, that Keith, that instructor or that school you went to sounds pretty damn good. But are they all the same all over the country? Is there a standard that they all have to meet, or is who actually checks on them? Who actually turns up? You know, you could say the two Andys here, you know, seasoned bikers. You could say to us, if we work for that department, right, you're going to go on a CBT as a novice and send us to somewhere where they're doing the test, and they wouldn't know who we were, and we could do the CBT and check to see if they're doing the standards. Maybe they need more checks on the people who are doing the CBTs.
And that actually forms part of the proposal a little bit later on, Andy. So we are going to come to that about the requirements for the instructors. So just staying on the subject of grouping learners into different groups depending on their ability. What's your thoughts on that one, Richard?
I mean, again, it comes down to making sure that you're personalising the training, doesn't it? But I suspect that would be very difficult, because you've got to think about it from the training school's point of view as well. I mean, what does a CBT cost? Roughly 100 quid.
Yeah.
And in theory, it's going to take a full day.
Yeah.
So the on-road bit, you can only have 2 people with you. So if you're a very small school, you're getting 200 quid for a day's work. That's actually quite a low amount of money. If you're a one-man band giving out training, fair enough. But if you're a school, all the overheads a school has got of the admin, the equipment, the space you need to, you need quite a bit of land, the bikes, the maintenance, the fuel, the insurance, all these things are going to add up. I mean, it was clear to both the places I've seen, the one where I did my CBT and my training, and the one that I've been and looked at since that's very new. It's very clear that these things are run on a shoestring anyway.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if you've got a small one, how are you going to start grouping people? Because that essentially means turning people away, and they're just going to go to the next one down the road that doesn't bother.
Yeah.
So I can see that there will be a benefit in it, but whether it's practical to do it or not, from the school's point of view, I think that might be very tricky.
And what are your thoughts on that, the Yorkshire Biker, please? Mr. B, can you talk Yorkshire Biker?
Yeah.
I'm not too sure what all the other schools are like, but the one I went to, he basically showed me, well, he asked if I knew how to work a clutch and just basically showed me a little bit, but then the other student had no idea, so obviously he spent more time with them than me, because I already had a bit of a clue as how to ride a bike. So I think it's a bit of a good idea, obviously because we both had different needs, so he spent more time with them.
But did you feel shortchanged in the fact that you were paying the same amount for your time and you weren't getting the same amount of attention or training?
I wouldn't say I felt shortchanged, because I already had a bit of an idea. She had no idea whatsoever, so spending that bit of extra time with her sort of brought her up to the same level as me, kind of thing. So, well, at the end of the day, we both came away with certificates. Whether we deserved it or not, I don't know, but we both got the same outcome.
Yeah. I just need to I need to make a comment right now, because everyone's saying that they had a CBT and the instructor I use that term loosely, says oh yeah, can you ride a bike? Yeah. Have you ridden a bike before? Yeah. Can you use a clutch? Yeah. So obviously when they asked those questions, did they then get you to qualify that by saying, okay, so you know how to use a clutch, yeah? And they went, yeah, I can use a clutch. Oh my god, I use a clutch all my days. Brilliant. Right, so can you explain to me how it works then, and then show me how it works?
Yeah.
Did they do that? Or do they just go, yeah, get on that bike then, and off you go? And then they go, let go of the clutch and go and kill themselves.
Well, when I went to the riding school that I'm going to do my dad's with...
you clearly had no clutch. Anything.
When I went to the riding school that I'm going to do my dad's with, I spoke to the administrator lady, who's lovely, and she said to me, because I wanted a big bike lesson, and she said, have you got your CBT? And I said, yes. And she said, well, we'll still need to see you ride on a 125 before we let you on a big bike, which made me go, I like these people.
You fucking hope so.
And I said, well, I'll be riding there on a 125. And she went, oh, okay, well, we'll leave that to the instructor then to make the decision. And he saw me ride into the car park and park up, and he went, no, it's fine, just jump straight on the 600. Which, for me, that was brilliant. That's what it should be.
I mean, the danger is that when we're all asked the same question, there are going to be one or two numpties who are going to kind of try and pull the wool over their eyes and say, oh yeah, I can do this. But I think you quickly found out, aren't you, when you go on that car park, wherever you do your off-road bit, whether or not you can do what you say you can do.
Exactly.
So, and I think that's the bit, isn't it, where they then really do assess how good or how bad you are, and then make that, like Yorkshire Biker said, you know, there's obviously someone that the instructor identified that somebody there needed a little bit more help than perhaps he did. Because we can all say, oh yeah, I've driven for 20 years, I can do a clutch no problem. But, you know, I would have got, if I said, oh yeah, I can know how to ride a motorbike, and if I'd got on that car park and I'd started, there was nowhere on earth I was going to get away with it. I would think I would have been quickly found out.
Yeah.
I think it's at that point, I guess they'll take those answers that you give with a bit of a pinch of salt, really. They'll really determine how good you are once they get on that car park and say, okay, this guy is okay, and I do feel confident enough to let him go on the road in the afternoon. Or, no, this bloke or this lady clearly hasn't got a clue. There's no way on earth I'm even going to attempt to fit this person out any further, or I'm going to recommend a bit more training before we even consider it. So that's the point, I think, where they're doing that assessment of you, aren't they? You're going around a little circuit, they're looking and watching what you're doing, how you're controlling the bike, how you're controlling the gears and the clutch. And I think they're in their own mind, they're thinking to themselves, that person's not okay, that person's not quite so okay, and that person clearly is no good at all. I think at that point that's where they're doing that assessment on it, because you can't possibly rely on just asking someone questions, because you know you're going to get someone there who's going to think they can just wing it, aren't they, and say anything just to think they can get through it. I think at that point that's where your assessment starts, doesn't it? When you're on that car park, they're watching you, they're observing, and then they're going to make an opinion, aren't they, about how bad you are.
We will come on to the qualification of CBT instructors in a sec. I'm just going to attack the Q&A, and then we're going to look at number 2.6 in the proposal. So Dave, Who Am I UK, number 1, is watching but can't join tonight, but thank you for watching, darling.
Hello, Dave.
All right, Dave.
Dave?
As I said earlier, we know Bex, 88, has recently been through her CBT. She's a little bit ahead of me in her training. She's now got a full bike licence. Congratulations, my dear.
Bex, why don't you join? Come on.
Bex, it would be really nice to have you on the panel if you want.
Because you're like fresh blood, you know what it's all about and what you've gone through.
She did an hour's free lesson through Get On with her local riding school, and they asked her if she'd ridden before, and she said no, just pillion quite a bit. And in the hour, it was all slow riding, starting, stopping, practicing with some manoeuvres which she found quite helpful prior to CBT. Now, that would be really useful for most people,
and that makes sense.
Yeah. And also, Bex says that on her CBT, there were 4 of us getting trained. I was the only one using a geared bike. The other 3 guys were on twist and goes. We all trained together on site, and I got taken off separately for on-road training. And we are going to cover the twist and go versus geared. That is part of the proposal, so we will come to that. We're not ignoring it.
It means scooters.
But that's a separate part, so we are going to come to that separately, okay? Hubcap.
Hubcap.
Hubcap for it.
Hubcap.
Hubcap. That's copyright. Copyright, Mr. B. Hubcap.
His CBT was basically the same as his Mod 1 before he went out on the road.
Yeah.
And if you look at the syllabus, he's quite freely available online. The syllabus of the CBT is very much the same as the Mod 1 and the Mod 2. And Weggy ZZR says, just to prove how much things have changed, he was riding a 1200cc Yamaha at 20 and was also driving a Robin Reliant 750 on his bike.
I wouldn't have put that out.
Honestly, Weggy, I wouldn't have put that well
I would have kept that one to myself.
That's a secret.
Every time someone says Weggy to me, I'm going to think, Robin Reliant.
Weggy.
When he eventually did his car test in the mid-90s, he had 4 lessons and got his car licence.
I can't believe Weggy has a Robin Reliant. That's ridiculous.
I can totally believe. Oh, actually, Weggy, you need to have words. Someone translated what you said.
Oh, okay.
And Mr. Hughesy says, where I did my CBT, same place as the lessons, we had 3, I think. I was the rookie and the other 2 were on renewal, I think, if I remember correctly. And they focused on me making sure I was safe, and I'd never been on a bike before then. And that sounds like exactly the way that it should have been focused. Yeah. So But I do think there is some merit to putting, not necessarily taking into account all levels of knowledge, but maybe putting into groups people who've previously passed their CBT and people who are rookies. Maybe breaking it down into those two groups. I think that would allow a little bit more focus and a little bit more personalisation to the needs of the individual learners.
Yeah.
No? Do you not think?
So, no, I'm still laughing about Weggy and a fucking Robin Reliant, to be honest. I can't believe you said that. We're live in everything.
He is a star, isn't he?
Thursday night hangout.
I know, it's just making me laugh. Sorry. Robin Reliant. Cool.
This to be.
But I do want to say something though. It's
Go
like
ahead.
what we need to focus on. It's really difficult, but you need to focus on the fact what is legislated and what must be, as opposed to what a trainer will do.
And that's where it becomes really, really difficult, because the CBT isn't legislation. Well, it kind of is, because you have to have a CBT
But
to
there
get on the
are
bike.
certain pass
but-
marks. There are certain pass marks in it.
Okay, so should we have a look at 2.6, because I think that kind of comes into what you're talking about. As part of the tailored approach to training, we believe it's important to address any gaps in the trainee's theoretical knowledge before the practical part of the course begins. Trainees do not have to pass the full theory test before undertaking a CBT. We are not currently proposing to mandate trainees to do so, as this would require amendments to the regulations. So they're not proposing to change the law. However, it might be something that, if there's enough support, if enough of us write to them and say, make bikers do the CBT, make bikers do their theory test before the CBT,
Like, understand what
then it
traffic
might be
lights
something
are.
they consider.
Isn't that the same thing? Understanding what traffic lights are, for example?
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's important. I think they should know what traffic lights mean.
Okay, so let's go to Keith. Keith, what are your thoughts on the theoretical knowledge? How much theoretical knowledge people come to a CBT with, and how much they leave with?
I think it varies. I mean, obviously, if you've got a young lad that's sort of 17 years old, clearly he's not going to have any theoretical knowledge whatsoever, as anyone learning to drive wouldn't.
Well, not necessarily. They might have been doing their theory test.
Yeah, possibly, but the
11 years of age, you can't
Yeah.
assume that they
no, but the chances are that they may not have, as opposed to someone that may have been driving 20 or 30 years. You would think, not in all cases, would have a better level of understanding about road signs, etc., and the highway code.
But someone who's driving 30 years has never
Yes.
had a theory
Yeah,
test.
yeah, I agree. In some cases, it's not always going to be the same, but clearly, I think even if it's a CBT, there's got to be an element whereby you are taught some of the theory, as I was on mine, because it's an integral part of the afternoon session. If you're going to be allowed to go on the road, you need to understand what the road signs are all about, and traffic lights and roundabouts, etc. Otherwise, you're going to be a danger to other people and yourself, aren't you?
Mhm.
I mean, I'm just looking on my school's website, and the statement there, I'll just like to read it out to you. It says here, if you show a good level of understanding and you're able to control the bike both in the car park and on the road to a level of safety where we feel that you're able to ride the bike unaccompanied without causing a danger to yourself and or other road users, you'll be issued with a DL 196, which is the CBT certificate. So, I mean, they've made it very clear, even on the website, that they're only prepared to issue that certificate once you've demonstrated a level of understanding and you're safe. And I think being able to understand what road signs are and a little bit of the highway code is part of that process, because you might well be able to ride a motorcycle, for example, but if you then get on the road and then you haven't got a clue what all these things are telling you, then quite clearly you're going to be a danger to yourself and other road users, aren't you?
Yeah, but this is the point. This is the point where I'm going to jump in, and I have to, because it fucking annoys me, right? Is that you have to prove, you have to demonstrate, you have to this, that, the other, you have to prove to the train. Well, hang on a minute. There's a thing that will actually prove that they actually know the rules of the road, and that's called a test.
Yes.
And we have one, and it's called the theory test. And you take a test, and you go through, a red light means this, a green light means that, and this, that, and the other, and what does
And
that
a whole lot of
signpost
other
mean?
stuff. And if you haven't ever done your theory test, I do strongly suggest, and I'll send you mine if you want to borrow it, I do strongly suggest that you have a go at it because it covers a lot more than you probably think it does.
Yes, but what I'm trying to say is that as for CBT, there is no test. You can ride alone without proving in terms of a test that you know that stuff.
Well,
And it's down to a trainer who might have been passed down, like you can go and teach people how to do CBT. And they say, all right, what's this sign mean? Oh, that's the gents' toilets. That's right. They can ride on a motorbike.
right. Let's send you the members of the panel for two.
There's no test.
Section 2.7, it kind of covers it a little bit more. So,
There's no test. They can't cover anything.
Richard, coming to you, they're not currently proposing that there is a change to the law in that you have to do your theory test before you do your CBT, but
There's a
as
problem.
part of the tailored approach to training, and I'm guessing that these new CBT guidelines are going to be called TAT, it's important to address any gaps in trainees' theoretical knowledge. What's your thoughts on that? Do you think that's enough, or do you think it's just a sticking
Do you think
plaster?
it's TAT?
I don't think it's enough. I think you should have to do the theory test. To be honest, I don't think the theory test is good enough in general.
No.
So, you know, the fact that you can do your theory test and then go on and... So I'm just going to mute Mr. Yorkshire for a second. The fact that you can even do your test on the back of that seems odd to me. When I did my driving test, there was no such a thing as a theory test. But what would happen was your instructor, or your examiner, I should say, would be observing you for the whole of the test and getting an idea of how you were driving, and then would ask you a series of questions related to what you'd actually done. The theory test, the fact that, I mean, some of the theory test questions are hilarious.
Yes.
You know, you see a circular sign with a red border and it says 30 on it. What does it mean? And they have to have 40 answers. So it's max speed 30, min speed 30. You must be aged 30, or you must have a minimum IQ of 30. It's kind of that level of question. So I don't think the theory test itself is very good, but I think the theory test was probably brought in to address the feeling that there should be one and the limitations of a computer system, rather than actually testing people.
And I think there's only so far that you can make a test go. You can't make it fix all of the problems with human stupidity.
No.
The theory test is at least a start.
Absolutely, and I suppose that's my point really, that although I don't think it's good enough, not having it at all
Yeah.
not good enough. People who have passed full licenses for bikes, cars, and so on demonstrate daily that they don't understand what road markings mean, what signs mean, which side of the road you should ride on. You know, it would seem obvious that you should have to understand the rules of the road before you use the road.
Yeah.
But you could argue, though, couldn't you, that the same doesn't apply for learning to drive a car. You know, you don't have to do a theory test before you start your driving lessons.
You don't, but you have to do it before you can drive alone.
You can't.
You're not in sole charge of a car.
No, but even so, if you, I mean, I'm playing devil's advocate here. You could argue that, you know, to be able to even get in and start learning to drive, you've got to have a level of you've got to be able to understand road signs. So why not, even at that stage, insist that you do the theory test first before you start your training? Just saying, you know.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
wouldn't argue against that, to be honest, Keith.
I'm just saying, You can't, we're almost applying different. We're almost saying, in order to ride a motorbike, again, I'm playing devil's advocate. Then you should do your theory test first. Well, I would argue if that's the case, then I would argue that you should do your theory test before you even start your driving lessons.
And Keith,
you're not going to get any disagreement.
I completely agree.
I think there is a difference. There is a difference.
That is that you can't
Well, I won't disagree.
ride the car on your own.
No, I agree, but
on a bike you can, and that's the problem.
And we're not here to discuss issues with the licensing with cars, although we're well aware of the many deficiencies and the many issues with the licensing of cars.
Like buying a German car and then putting a personalised plate on it, for example.
Yeah, but I just want to put a bit of balance in it, really, because if you're going to argue one for one method of transport, then you should argue it for all methods of transport.
Exactly, and the whole idea of structuring bike licensing so that you can only ride certain powers of bikes at certain ages is something I wholeheartedly believe should be applied to cars in some form or other.
I do. Yeah.
I think we have to be careful though that you don't ever want to bend the ear of an MP and say that the two things should be equivalent.
Yes.
Because the two things aren't equivalent, and
exactly.
and it could work both ways to the point where they say, well, actually, then we'll do away with the CBT altogether.
Yes.
And the CBT, I think, does have a benefit. It's just not strong enough yet.
Richard, CBT has been proven to have saved thousands of lives.
But compared to the cars, because if you pushed it with the MPs who don't understand bikes, they would probably take the logical approach that actually, why should you be able to ride a bike at all until you've passed a test?
Yeah, and that's a really, really sensible comment, and thank you again. Gosh, you are being sensible tonight, Richard. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think.
I think that compliment was so backhanded, it might have come from with a forearm.
I know, it was a genuine.
Actually, no, it was an uppercut. It was actually an uppercut.
It was a roundup. Let's be honest, it was a roundup.
It got me right there, it did.
I round the air off.
Like a punch to the solar plexus.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
moving on.
So moving on to Suffolk Andy, what are your thoughts on this about addressing gaps in theoretical knowledge before the course begins?
Well, I don't think
that should fall to the CBT instructor.
Yeah, I think nobody should actually go on the road unless they've got a knowledge of what that road is. If you put me on a horse and said jump over those jumps, I'm going to fall off. So you're not going to say to me, Andy, we want to go to Spain. Can you, like I said earlier, can you pilot the plane because we're going to crash? So, so if you're going to go on the road, you need that knowledge of how that road system works. Mm-hmm. And if you haven't got a good knowledge, you're going to come to grief. There's no doubt about it. So I'm with most people. I think you should take a theory test. I'm not so sure about the theory test myself, what they do, questions like if you see a man with his arm burned and what do you do? Some of the silly questions. And I will tell you, I took the theory test, one of these test ones online a few months back, and I failed. I had to take it twice.
Does that mean they took the bike off you?
No, that's just one of the do-it-yourself things. And I actually, I'll do this, and I failed. So I had to do it twice, so I passed the second time. But no, going back to what we're saying, yeah, you've got to know your road craft and your road sense. Mm-hmm. And you shouldn't be put on that road unless you know 100%. I'm not sure myself if taking the theory test, what they do now, is the test that you should do. Because I think some of the questions in there are not relevant at all to the modern road anyway. Yeah. And I think they should look at it and make it streamlined and make it more relevant to what roads we're on. But I don't think you should get on that bike and go on that road until you've done a theory test.
This might be a bit left field.
That's a really good point, Andy. Thank you.
Might be a bit left field, but it would seem to make sense that rather than you going away and having a book from the newsagents and having a look at it, and actually what people don't do, it seems, is learn the highway code. They learn the questions.
Yeah.
The books of questions.
I did.
Which doesn't give you the theory necessarily unless you actually look into it. But it would seem to make sense that maybe the CBT should be a two-part thing, where you actually have a classroom session that generates you a certificate. So you've actually had some training on what the highway code is. Because I know going through with Mrs. C for doing her theory test for the cars, a lot of it is, what does this sign mean? What does this sign mean? What does this sign mean? And there's none of the bringing the thing together where I was trying to go out with her and explain the way that signs all fit together as you're going down the road. So first you see the blue sign with a turn right ahead, then you see the one with a turn right, and then you see the one with a no entry just past. And it's how the things all link together, and the theory behind them as well. So, they'll show you one of the signs for a junction and say, what does this mean? And you go, oh, well, that's a T junction coming up. But actually, there's quite a lot of subtleties to the signs that once you know them, you don't have to learn every sign because they become obvious.
Yeah.
But when it's just kind of fire and forget, what does this sign mean? Is it A, B, C, or D? You're not learning the reasoning behind that sign in the first place. So it struck me on the CBT, and I mentioned it before, that one of the questions that was, I mean, they asked us, do you know what this sign means? Do you know what this sign means? And there was this one particular person who didn't know any of them. And then they fell back to, well, what does a sign mean if it's circular with a red border? Don't know. How about triangular with a red border? Don't know. What's the difference between a blue and a red sign? Don't know. And it was that fantastic, complete lack of any understanding that shocked me, that somebody could then walk away with a CBT certificate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is down.
One would hope that at the end of the session they did know the difference between a circular sign with a red border and a triangle sign with a red border.
You would hope so, but there was only kind of half an hour set aside for that thing anyway, so it was so rapid fire,
So the proposal for a tailored approach to training, or TAT, is definitely getting a big thumbs up from the panel from the side of things. So moving on to the Yorkshire Biker then, just to finish off on this section. How do you feel about, in the TAT approach, the CBT instructor should be addressing any gaps in the trainee's theoretical knowledge before the practical part begins? Do you think that's workable? Do you think that's a sensible thing?
I think it would be workable. Obviously, it says to encourage trainers to assess trainees' knowledge of theory. But obviously, maybe not have to do a theory test before you get allowed to do your CBT, but I think it should be incorporated. Maybe, obviously, like in a car, you can go and have your lessons and then do your theory test before you pass your practical. I think that should be pretty much what works on a bike. You can do your CBT, but you can only you do your CBT, but you can only actually ride on the road once you've passed a theory test.
That's a great idea.
I do think to be able to ride on the road, I mean, I've not done the theory test myself, but I do think you should have to do the theory test, because you can do your CBT, go and ride out on the road and not have a clue as to what anything means. So I do think they should change it so that the theory test is incorporated into any test that you do.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
Yeah, and I think that's a great suggestion, that if you're going to do your CBT, as part of the longer term goal to getting your full bike license, in the same process as getting your car license, that you start your lessons, then you do your theory test, and then you carry on your lessons and you do your test. That you do your CBT, at some point later you do your theory test, because it's part of the whole lesson process. That's fair enough. But if you're going to do your CBT with the objective of getting out on the road on a 125 with L plates, you have to do your theory test as well. I think that's quite a sensible suggestion. I like it. So, Mr. B, anything to add on that one? Otherwise, we'll go on to 2.7.
No, the only thing I would say is just that the onus is always seems to be, and a lot of this legislation is on the trainer.
Yes, and we're going to come to that in section 3.
There's no check to see that the trainer has actually accomplished that.
And we'll come to that in section 3.
Okay, so nothing to say then.
Okay, excellent. So I'll just attack the Q&A again. So Mr. Hughesy, says, the thing I don't get with the CBT is why they don't include the theory or basic. I had my full car licence before I did my CBT, so I knew the rules of the road. If someone had started straight into the CBT, they'd have no clue, and that's what we were talking about. He also says if they included the theory, it might put off some of the chavs who give bikes names, so there is a plus sign. And again, no one's going to argue with that, I don't think.
What do you think about that Yorkshire biker?
Yorkshire biker's a chav.
I am on a
I'm
scooter
just
though.
asking what he thought.
We know what you're saying. Who Am I UK 1, Dave says, when I did my test, it was the first part of a 2-part test. Part 1 was very much like the CBT, but more talking. Do you think that was a good or a bad thing, though, that it was more talking? Was it more instruction talking, or was it just more yammering and showing off on part of the CBT instructor? And again, we'll come to that in section 3, which might not be tonight.
No.
So, number 2.7, we propose to encourage trainers to conduct an assessment of trainers' knowledge of theory matters before a course begins or as part of the course. To help trainers with this and provide a consistent measure, DVSA could provide access to theory test learning materials so that trainers can develop an assessment to evaluate the trainee's knowledge, or the training industry may wish to consider developing a tool to support this. That is such a shitty fucking proposal, sorry, in my opinion. In my opinion, that's a really shitty proposal, because what they're saying is we could say that they have to make sure that learners understand the DVSA level, but they've got to develop their own training materials for this.
Again, the onus on the trainer.
Again, yeah. So what these proposals are doing is tightening up what you've got to do to pass your CBT, but without providing any extra to the CBT instructors, in my opinion. So 2.7, let's go to Richard, because I know he's got it open in front of him. Richard, what are your thoughts on this one?
I was just reading that one again because I don't understand it. It does say that DVSA would provide the materials,
which are already available.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean it's more of the same, isn't it? Really. I don't think that adds anything over the stuff we've already talked about, does it?
Yeah.
It's usual government speak now, isn't it? Just repeat yourself and hope that people stop listening.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we're not going to, and we will carry on these Sunday night hangouts as long as it takes to get to the end of the document, bitches.
But it's the same problem, is that they say, we propose to encourage trainers. What the fuck is that? That's not
ensure that trainers.
There's no test there. It's like, oh, we encourage you to tell people how to use a clutch. No. You do a fucking test. Can you use a clutch? Yes, no. No, we encourage you. It's ridiculous. It's fucked up.
I think some of the rhetoric they use on these questions now, when Mrs. B was reading it out, tell you the truth, I was completely lost. I was, and she was doing it so well, but I found the question a bit gobbledygook. You know, I was listening the best I could, and I'm not stupid, but I'm not the most intelligent guy. And I was listening to that question, and I'm just Joe bloody Public, and I was listening to that question, and I thought, what a load of crap this is. Because nobody can understand it. Please, when you're going to put these documents out, put it into a rhetoric that the common man can understand. And I just found that a bit confusing.
Yeah. So basically, what they're saying is they're going to encourage trainers to assess trainees' knowledge of the theory before the course begins, or as part of the course, whatever.
It's exactly what they said earlier in another question.
But in order to do that and to make it consistent, the drivers, whatever it was, I've put a link to it below the hangout again. There's another document which is the standards that people should be, it's the driving standards, that could provide access to the theory test learning materials, which are already freely available on the internet, so that trainers can develop an assessment. So again, it's pushing the onus onto the trainers to develop an assessment of trainers' knowledge, of trainees' knowledge, of your new CBT people's knowledge, or the training industry as a whole, which is never going to happen, can develop a tool to support it. So basically they're saying we're going to abdicate responsibility for what theory knowledge new people have, because we're going to strongly encourage you to assess people, is what I personally take from that.
But if you're a trainer of these people who are turning up who've never ridden a motorbike, and you haven't got the knowledge to train them, you shouldn't be training them anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, all this, stuff we're going to provide you with, blah, 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 you should have that knowledge anyway, because you've got these people's lives in your hands.
Exactly.
It's just repeating itself again.
Yeah.
Does anyone feel strongly enough about 2.7 that they want to make an argument about it, or should we move on to 2.8? I'm going to take that silence as a no. 2.8 says that we think it's important to make sure that trainees know they need to have the right theoretical knowledge and understanding of the highway code before taking a CBT. We intend to improve public knowledge about the requirements of the CBT. It doesn't say how they propose to do that.
That's just a throwaway fucking paragraph.
That's just...
What's the point?
It's just wind, isn't it?
We think it's important. What the fuck's that got to do with fuck all?
We don't disagree that it's important that trainees have the right theoretical knowledge and understanding of the highway code before taking a CBT. None of us would argue with that statement.
But then they're going to improve public knowledge.
How?
They don't say that. They just say we're going to improve it.
Right.
So the wankers, basically.
So are we going to have some of these government things, adverts coming up on the telly telling you how to do your CBT? If you no, well, you're going to have full spread bits in papers, or you're only going to have it on the internet, and most of these people wouldn't even look at it on the internet anyway. So
I think they're going to have the return of Charlie Says, aren't they?
Yeah.
Charlie Says.
Yeah.
This is how you use a clutch.
Before you do your CBT.
I don't know. I really don't know. It's now disappearing up its own arse here, I think.
Charlie says don't ask Jim to fix it.
Okay, we're moving on from theoretical stuff now as we go on to 2.9. In respect of practical training, we want to continue promoting how closely CBT fits with the national standard for driver and rider training. We want to encourage instructors and trainees to recognise that a minimum standard of riding must be demonstrated before they can successfully complete CBT, and that some learners may take longer and need more training to reach that standard. Well, that is as it currently is. That's a statement of fact as it currently is, in my understanding. Does anyone on the panel understand things to be differently?
It just sounds like what it is, like you're saying. That's exactly what the CBT is. And, they're not. If they're going to make these changes and they're going to keep these things in, why change it? Because it's just the same anyway.
I wouldn't say they were technically saying it's the CBT as it is, because obviously if it was, then it would be fit for purpose.
No, they're saying we encourage instructors and trainees to recognise that a standard must be demonstrated before you can get your CBT. Therefore, it might take longer for some people, but that's the way it is currently. It does take some people a couple of hours when they're just doing it every 2 years. Or for people like me who've never ridden a bike and don't know anything about gears, it's going to take a couple of days.
Yeah.
I understand that.
Like I said earlier about the guy with my son, he said he had to come back the next day and do 2 more hours to get the certificate. So, exactly what they're doing now anyway.
But I find the whole thing non-committal. We want to encourage. I mean, we're talking about people going out on the road on their own on a motorbike where they can die if they don't know what they're doing, and they say, "Oh, well, if that's the case, if people are dying going out on a motorbike,
encourage them. Let's go! Yay! You're doing really well."
Well, no. It doesn't say we will encourage. It says we would like to. It's so non-committal. It makes me fucking sick. It's so, what is it? That's not legislation, is it? We would like to encourage.
No,
You might as well just say, I couldn't give a fuck.
This isn't what the wording of the legislation
No,
is.
I think what they're trying to say is that anybody who does, anybody who does this should actually have a knowledge of what they're doing. And you should, if I said I'm going to take my CBT, before I turn up, I should actually go online and find out what it's about, find out what I need, and the instructor should be the same. So when I turn up, I've got a knowledge of what I'm doing. I'm not just walking in there and go, "Hi everybody, I've never ridden a bike and I don't know what I'm doing." So so I think that's what they're trying to say, is that it's your responsibility as a trainee to find out more about it before you go there.
Yeah, and I get that, Andy. And what most of the words you said were should.
They're pushing the responsibility over to you.
Yeah, but what I would say is must.
Yeah, as a biker, do you not think, and again, this is the difference between bikes and cars, do you not think as bikers we are a little bit more savvy, generally? If you want to jump onto two wheels, you're a little bit more savvy, in that you know that you're going to be a lot more at risk by jumping on a bike, therefore you will take a lot more precautions to protect yourself.
We are, as riders, we are more understanding. But when you say should, it doesn't mean anything.
No,
if you
but
say must, it's different.
But do you want to legislate things so that it's so tough to get your bike licence that only the elite few can get one?
Not the elite. I'm talking about people that must understand the highway code. They must know the highway code. They must know what a clutch is.
People must know all this shit to drive a car. It makes no fucking difference. You look at the school round the corner from us. You look at how people park. They all know the highway code. Makes no fucking difference to them.
I can't speak for the fucking terrible parents that drive round by our school. I don't know how they got their test passed.
They have passed their test.
I think that's the same around every school in Britain, mate.
And still disregard it. So must, should, I think in this case becomes interchangeable.
But they're not in a 2 to 3 ton BMW X6, and they can't drive for shit, but they'll be fine because it's a fucking tank on 4 wheels.
Don't talk to me about BMWs.
Well, it doesn't really matter whether it's a car or a bike. The problem is that people, when they pass a test, they forget about the what they've done to get their license, like the highway code and that, and they ignore it. Which is why you get people going over on red lights and risking their lives and everybody else's lives because they want to be 1 minute ahead of themselves.
Yeah. And good evening, Dave. And yes, that's exactly the point that Andy was making.
Yeah, what we're talking about to get a license to ride on the road.
Well, people do that. They put responsibility.
You've got a responsibility for yourself. When you turn up for these things, you just can't turn up there and don't know a thing. It's up to you to research it, look into it, go there with a bit of knowledge and do the test. And it's exactly the same for the instructor. He's got to be there with his knowledge, which he's going to pass on to you. You come with yours, and you should have a good day out, get your certificate, Bob's your uncle.
Yeah, and I understand that. And what I'm trying to say, though, Andy, is that yes, the rider should come along to the test in an ideal scenario, blah, 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 but obviously they don't. And there needs to be a check. There needs to be some sort of proper formal check to make sure that the rider is, done his research, and also that the instructor has ensured they've done their research.
Yeah, but
the only way you can do that is with a test.
The part about the instructor is covered in part 3. We've got 2 more parts to get through before we get to part 3, and I would like to get through 2.10 and 2.11 before we finish tonight, if that's okay with everybody. So any more comments on 2.9? I'll take that as a unanimous no. Mr. Hughesy makes the observation, why is it always encouraged? Why isn't it made sure? And
Yeah.
Because make sure would involve legislation, and that's not what this proposal's about.
Or a test.
But you're right. There is a bigger change needs to take place than just what is being proposed at the moment. He also says that government legislation equals no one can understand it, and that's to do with the wording that they use. And recently the government did a thing about, or there was a plain speaking awards for the way things are put. Now these proposals certainly will not win any plain speaking awards.
Clearly not.
Hubcap says non-committal advice. Will I think keep little Jimmy's mum from suing the training school for not properly ensuring that Jimmy understood the dangers, etc. on the road before he was killed on his way home from his CBT pass? Well, yeah, that non-committal advice will probably cover the training school's arse. We, the government, encourage the trainers to do the work we cannot think about, says Dave. Absolutely. Stealth says like a boss on a Sunday. Well, no, it's not quite like a boss. This is discussing some changes to UK legislation and training requirements.
And it won't be like a boss until I get my say.
And Tumai says about his training, it was very good, talking about braking and how it changes with the weather and lots of other things. Excellent. Okay, 2.10 says we want to ensure, that's kind of committal,
Maybe.
that trainees are better prepared to deal with some of the more challenging situations that they're likely to encounter on busy urban roads, and that they have the skills to cope with those situations as soon as they begin riding unaccompanied. That's a positive statement, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's not committal though.
We believe this can be achieved by encouraging both trainees and instructors to recognise that the 2-hour on-road training element is a minimum requirement and not necessarily the default position. By shifting the emphasis to ensure that trainees have demonstrated competence to ride unaccompanied, we expect both trainees and instructors will come to realise that the on-road training will often exceed the minimum 2 hours required.
I do like that idea, because I've always thought that you get your training from the amount of hours that you're on the road, not from a book or from, oh, you can ride round a cone, you've passed. No, I think the more time you can get in the seat, the better you are equipped for when things happen.
True.
Absolutely, Dave. Yorkshire Banker, what's your thoughts on this?
Actually, I think I'm going to go offline because I'm a bit tired and I'm not understanding questions properly, so I'm not able to give a good enough answer.
That's fair enough, son.
No problem, darling. We'll catch you next time.
Yep, cool. No worries. See you later. Have fun, guys.
See you later.
No, darling.
Right, invisible.
Suffolk Andy, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think it comes back to the same, we're going over the same ground. I think all the questions are saying the same, but I think if you use an instructor and you had somebody who, like Keith said on one of his CBT tests, that is not confident, 2 hours is not enough, and you've got to be prepared as an instructor to put more hours in to get that guy through it or that girl through it. And I think 2 hours is not enough, and I think you should have a few more hours on the road until you can prove that you are confident to take that bike away and drive home, basically, or whatever you want to do. So, I do agree with that.
Yeah. Thank you. And Richard?
Yeah, again, I mean, it's more of the same, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
It's tailoring the approach again. And again, you're going to have the problem that when people are aiming to get the cheapest possible CBT, that they are going to be feeling the monetary pressure to keep the time as short as possible.
And that would be my argument against this section.
But they're basically, I suppose they're saying the same as they said to you, aren't they? Come back for another day.
Yeah.
But my come back for another day wasn't come back for another 2 hours or come back for another half day. It was come back for another full day, whether or not that was required or.
Yeah. Did you have to pay for that?
Oh yeah, another full day's.
So you had to pay twice, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. But did you feel, because you paid twice, I know it's a lot of money, but did you feel at the time that was worth going back for the second day?
Honestly, no.
No.
At the end of the second day, I didn't feel like I had got another 6 hours, and it was 6 hours riding. I didn't feel like I got 6 hours worth of experience out of it because I had such a nightmare at the end of it, where I don't think I should have been awarded my CBT.
Okay.
I think that a set cost for your CBT, albeit higher than it currently is at £100, would both encourage trainers to spend the necessary amount of time on the training and also discourage people from just taking it every 2 years because it's cheaper than taking the big bike test. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I can go with that.
But
Sorry, I was just going to say, one of the things about assessing yourself, from what I've recently learned from my head injury, is it's very hard to assess yourself because you're traveling at time with yourself, and although you are learning slowly, you are learning all the time, and you have small changes. When I had my fall from work, within a week, I was thinking to myself, "Oh, I'm perfectly good enough to go back to work." The doctors didn't, and they'd just given me another month off to still make sure that they, in their opinion, that I'm still good to go out. So when the assessor assessed you, the trainer assessed you, he may have seen a change in you which you didn't perceive.
I understand that, but what I did at the end of my second day riding was to cause such a danger to myself and the people around me that there is not a chance on earth that I should have been allowed on a bike on my own.
Oh.
And I'm saying that from a place of honesty and from a place of self-knowledge. Oh, hello, Bex.
Hello, Bex.
Hi,
Hello,
Bex.
Hiya.
Hello.
I know Wakey's joined as well, but I'm more excited about Bex. Sorry, Wakey.
Welcome, Bex.
Hiya.
So moving across the panel, on to Keith. What's your thoughts on going back to 2.10 about making sure that trainees are better prepared to deal with some challenging situations that they're likely to encounter on busy urban roads?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good idea. I mean, there's no point not getting any training that might not prepare you for what you might encounter. I mean, I think Mr. Hughesy touched on this at the last hangout when he talked about whether he thought it was right that the instructor took him down a certain type of road or not. And I think we said at the time that, you know, that's perfectly right and reasonable because you don't know what you're going to face out on the road. There's no point taking you down a nice, lovely road with no traffic on, because that's unrealistic. So I agree with that. I think it's only right that you're given the level of training that will prepare you for what you need when you're out on the road.
And what about the 2-hour on-road riding element being the minimum requirement? Do you think there's a shift required to make that a minimum and not like you do your 2 hours and that's it?
I think it goes back to tailoring training to the individual's needs. I mean, 2 hours might be sufficient for some people, but others might need another hour, another 2 hours just to feel confident enough to be able to go out on the road. So, you know, it goes back to that point. I think you know, it's different strokes for different folks, isn't it? And one size doesn't always fit all. You know, some people feel more confident with you know, a small amount of training. Others feel they might need a little bit longer, but I guess the pressure is from the trainers currently that, you know, for how much it costs, they're limited to how much training they're able to provide in that time, and you know, and still make a little bit of money, because that's, at the end of the day, that's what they're in business for. So there's an argument to increase the cost of the CBT, which then allows you to give a trainee a bit more training that they might actually need.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Bex, we're going to come to you next.
Okay.
So just to summarise, we're looking at section 2.10 in the consultation paper, which states that we want to ensure trainees are better prepared to deal with some of the more challenging situations they're likely to encounter on busy urban roads, and that this can be achieved through encouraging both trainees and instructors to recognise that the 2-hour on-road riding element is a minimum requirement and not the default position, by shifting the emphasis to ensure that trainees have demonstrated competence to ride unaccompanied. We expect that both trainees and instructors will come to realise that the on-road riding will often exceed the minimum 2 hours requirement.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, the school that I was with really got good because they.
Sorry, Bex, can you speak up, darling?
Oh, can you hear me now?
That's a little bit better.
Basically, the school I was with, they did a guaranteed pass scheme. So if you didn't complete the CBT in the first day, you could go back for any further training. It was all free, which I think we should do, to be honest.
Do you think what they offered you in the one day or in the time that they gave you before you passed, do you think that was sufficient to be okay to go out on a 125, or do you think there was an element of, that's close enough, we'll figure it out?
For me, I wouldn't have been comfortable going out on the road on a 125 just from that, no.
Even with the pass guarantee?
If I kept going back, then yeah, but I mean, I got my CBT the day that I went, but I don't think that I would have been confident to go on the road straight after that day. No.
All right, so that's great feedback. And Bex, can I just ask you, what part of that whole process did you feel that the missing element about why you thought you would not be comfortable? What was missing from that training?
I just think just time and experience on the road.
Right. Same as for me. I didn't have any confidence whatsoever in any aspect of my roadcraft, of holding or using a bike.
Yeah. I felt I was still making little mistakes all the way through, you know, only little things, but I just didn't feel confident enough after that day.
I didn't have a clue about changing gears.
Well, I know that.
I just kind of tried to figure it out, and sort of, I was doing clutchless gear changes all the time. Well, I locked out my rear wheel going downhill. I did all kinds of things.
So basically then what we're saying is maybe the CB should be more than one day.
And that's what the proposal is that it's not necessarily a 2-hour on-road riding element, that it's going to be a minimum of 2 hours on-road riding element, and it will take as long as it takes.
Yeah, so maybe
until you and the instructor are confident that you can go out on your own.
Yeah, like a day to get over all the mistakes and then go back and learn from those and then be more confident.
Yeah. So should we go to Weggy and see what his thoughts are on this? Thank you, Bex. That was really useful. Thank you.
That's no problem.
Evening all.
Evening, Weggy.
Yeah.
Hello.
That's been a very entertaining show, this, I must admit.
Brilliant.
I'm glad you thought so. What are your thoughts on increasing the 2-hour on-road riding element and making sure that the 2 hours is a minimum requirement and not the standard requirement, and that the expectation of both learners and instructors is that the 2 hours is probably going to be much higher than that?
I personally think that 2 hours is probably way too short, to be honest with you. I mean, as you probably know, I've never done anything with the CBT. Yeah. In our years, we just went straight on the road and we taught ourselves how to ride. But as far as the actual CBT over a one-day period is concerned, I believe that all aspects of the CBT, whether it be going back to what Keith was talking about as far as the theory is concerned, I think the theory, firstly, should be done first. Secondly, I think that any road practice should be far, far longer than a minimum of 2 hours.
Yeah.
I think you're probably looking at a period, I think, at a minimum of at least 5 days, if I'm being completely honest. You know, and that's just as a basic week session of learning the roads after your theory. Because let's be honest with you, as experienced bikers that most of us are, it takes far longer than a week to learn about different road conditions, the environment, the traffic, the road markings. Everything changes all the time. And in agreement, yeah, definitely far more than 2 hours. I would say definitely 5 days minimum.
I've been riding 29 years and I still find new things
Absolutely.
quite often.
Yeah.
When the guys here are doing their IAMs, or IM, whatever it is, watching their videos, I was looking at that and I was going, I never thought of that. And it's only because of the fact that I haven't done one of those courses that I didn't know about it. And just watching it, you learn more. So
Yeah.
you're always learning while you're on the ride. And just going back a little bit, the first part of that, where it says, talking about, paraphrasing, better training for the roads of today, would that mean they're going to train you to filter?
Well, you could interpret it as that, and I think they should. I think that should be included as it's illegal for any new rider to do.
Yeah, it's not just when to filter, but it's also when not to filter.
Exactly. And what we need to be looking for.
I'm very much with the hugger guide on that one. It seems to me that if you've only done if you had Weggy's suggestion, maybe, but if you've only done 2 hours on the road, I don't think you should be filtering.
No,
definitely not.
No one would disagree with you on that one, Richard. But what
I mean, the suggestion that
is that 2 hours isn't the
true.
2 hours is the minimum, but for most people it's going to be a lot longer. And what I was going to propose to Weggy is how would 5 days sit in terms of fairness and cost and everything else? They were doing
I think
just to make you to buy, for example.
Going back to cost, I mean, going back to what Richard was saying earlier, especially with the smaller smaller schools, viably speaking, you couldn't work that on the basis that you're just paying, say, for instance, £100 for a CBT. I think for it to be much more established, then it needs to be a higher premium. As much as we do not like higher premiums, to establish a school that's going to be putting a lot more in, which means you're going to be getting a lot more in from the pupil for them to be, should we say, even slightly more qualified to be on the road in the first place. If need be, the fees will have to go up.
Yeah.
If the fees need to go up to establish better riders from the off, then that's the way it's going to go. But it's got to be across the board, and I fully agree with Richard. The smaller schools where you've got, say, for instance, 2-3 blokes, and they're only being paid, say, £200 if you've got 2 riders per day, that is the bare minimum which they could affordably run their business.
Yeah.
Otherwise, then they're going to be doing it for next to nothing. And at the end of the day,
they couldn't afford to rent the land and to insure and maintain the bikes and everything else.
Yeah.
If you think about it, how much it costs you to, most people have 20, 25 driving lessons, don't they, before they pass their test. You put that amount of money together, that's quite a bit. So if the motorbike licence to learn was a little bit more and made you safer, it'd be money well spent, as long as it doesn't get out of control, as long as it's kept at a decent level that most people can afford. They couldn't be a problem with that, Wiggy.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely.
It's already been proven to have got out of control when you look at all the different tests. If you look at someone who's 16 wanting to ride a big bike, they can't ride a big bike until they're 21, so that's 5 years, and I think it's 4 tests that they have to sit. And each test you have to pay for, assuming that you pass each one first time. You've still got to have the bike in the insurance, and the insurance at the right level before you can take your test on it.
Yeah.
So it's already almost prohibitively expensive, and you look at the numbers, and as you've done today, Andy, if you look at the numbers of people taking their big bike tests, and number of 19, 20, 21-year-olds taking big bike tests, there's just none because it is so expensive.
There's also no benefit, is there?
I'll just say one thing though. The CBT as it is seems to it is a business, and it's obviously needed by law to give the people the facility to ride. I don't want to say a scooter, but a motorcycle. Yeah. But from the perspective you look at it now, it's become a bit too much of a conveyor belt.
Yeah.
It's a conveyor belt of getting people in, getting them done, getting them out of the way. That's not what it's all about. It's about making sure that people are safe on the road. And yeah, it's got to be controlled. It's not a money making scheme. It's about first and foremost making sure that people are ready to ride a motorcycle on today's roads. Yeah. And my son did his CBT about a year ago. He's been riding a 50cc scooter. He's already had one accident. And to be quite honest with you, as much as I'd love my kids to be riding motorcycles, I didn't feel safe for him after spending. He actually did the CBT on a Saturday, and he had to go back for another 3 or 4 hours before they were actually what they classed as being happy with him to be riding on a road. Now, from my perspective, and like Andy, both Andys and Skeggy and Keith and Richard now have been riding a few years, we know how dangerous the roads can be. We know, we see it every day. We've become accustomed to it. We're vigilant, but that vigilance only comes with experience, and you haven't got that experience as a young rider. You just literally hop on a bike and you ride. Yeah. So from that perspective, I think there needs to be a lot more awareness about the conditions, the road conditions, and the conditions that can hurt you most. And there need to be a lot more warnings when you're doing your CBT, as far as possibly even videos are concerned, as to what the possibilities are and what can happen if you do not do certain things in a certain fashion.
But do you think, and this is partly me being devil's advocate, but partly what I actually think, do you think that putting all the responsibility on young riders is the right way to go, or do you think that maybe some of the investment should be in raising awareness of other road users, that there's actually bikes on there and that it's legal for them to filter, and that they should be making second and third checks to see if there is a bike coming?
Absolutely. I mean, we got in Suffolk. They've had a scheme on the local radio station. You've seen it before. Think Bike. Andy probably seen it. It was done by Suffolk Radio. Yeah. And and that's great. All that sort of thing. And you do need more awareness. Certainly within the press about motorcycles, and I feel that even, shall we say, people who are doing their car tests need to be aware more of the lesser safe motorists on the road, which are the motorcyclists and the cyclists. I think cyclists are their own problem. They make their own problems. Cyclists, to me, to be quite honest with you, but. Yeah, across the board, people need to be made more aware of motorcycles being on the road. Because let's be honest, we talk about becoming invisible. Sometimes we're too invisible.
Yeah.
Ride invisible.
And that's the whole point of the sort of ride invisible thing, is that you have to assume that when you're on the bike that no one can see you. You have to assume that no one has seen you as you're approaching a junction, because 9 times out of 10 they haven't even fucking looked.
No. Exactly.
Okay, so I'm just going to attack the Q&A. I know we're running over our 2-hour usual limit, but this is really, really interesting. We've got one more point to get through. Learn to ride videos. If any of the people watching this haven't looked at Learn to Ride videos, he's an instructor and he does really, really great instructional videos. We're big fans of him.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to go through some of his comments. 4 hours is the minimum here in Northern Ireland. I've seen trainees pass in that time. I've also had to take people out for 3 full days in a row at no extra charge. It depends on the instructor's attitude. You have to care about the people and not just be in it for the money.
Absolutely.
He also says, I'm a one-man band and I charge £180 for CBT, which, as a general rule, that's quite steep, but you're going to get really good training for that, because 115 if they've got previous experience, but there's no extra charge if it takes a day or a week. He teaches IAM and ROSPA techniques from the word go, including counter-steering, limit points and the like.
I'd be
Which
interested
is
to know.
fantastic for a CBT.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to know which ones, because there are some IAM techniques that I wouldn't want to see learners doing.
Well, yeah, there is. That's
Interestingly enough, there's a girl in our group.
Assume that it would be the ones that are most appropriate to a learner.
Absolutely, but I think it's worth saying it because obviously there's going to be people watching this thinking, oh, I'll just go off and read the IM book and go and do all that kind of stuff and they'll end up dead. But there's a girl on in our IM group, and her husband is a national observer. So he's the observer that qualifies the local observers. So she was on a CBT and he's shown her loads of stuff, and then she went to do her direct access. And they went out for a ride, and they crucified her, said you'll never pass your test riding like that because you're using police advanced techniques.
Yeah.
And the DSA don't want to see it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. The test is always about how to pass your test as opposed to how to ride.
Yeah.
And one of the things I got pulled up on was using engine braking, because they want to see my brake light and they want to see me.
Exactly.
They want to see me using my brakes rather than using my gears sensibly to save fuel, save the environment and use the bike most effectively.
Whereas IAM is not about saving fuel at all.
No.
It was an example.
Yeah, but that's the kind of difference there is. And the IAM, if you're doing it, you will be using engine braking.
Yeah.
And you won't be showing your rear light unless there's somebody behind you. And then you might show your rear light without actually applying your brake, just by putting some pressure on. But that kind of thing.
Then you will.
Yeah.
If you use engine braking and show your rear light, then as long as you know your rear light, that's all they give a shit about.
Do what you need to do to pass your test as opposed to how to ride a bike.
The problem there with people who've just done a CBT is that they're probably not at that level of observation and awareness of everything going on around them. So you might end up saying, well, I'll just do a bit of engine braking, and then somebody takes you out.
Yeah. But just a point about engine braking. I mean, that also depends on obviously the road conditions and also what type of bike you're riding. Obviously, engine braking on a 4-cylinder motorcycle is a lot different than riding engine braking with a V-twin or a single.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's knowing your bike and the conditions to go with it.
Yeah.
And all of that is time in the saddle.
Yes.
That is well. Yeah, absolutely.
And you're never going to know that without knowing your bike intimately.
No, that's it.
A final word on this from Learn to Ride videos is this: my final word on the matter. I try to give the best training to anyone as I would my own children. An instructor has to really care. That's not easy at times for both the pupil and the instructor, but it has to be done.
But he's got a reputation as well, hasn't he? If he provides good quality training, that's obviously going to encourage his trainees to recommend him, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Which is good for his business as well as the trainee. So that's absolutely.
I mean, on that point, it would be interesting, and I would have thought it, especially the way the governments have been recently. They like these kind of things, but to have statistics publicly available. So, how many CBTs has this training school given out? How many of those have had accidents?
Yes.
Yeah.
But that would be incredibly difficult for them to crack.
Shouldn't be.
Well, it should be, but they make you queue for 2 hours to get through border control, but they still don't know who's in the country and who's not.
Yeah.
So I think finding out which training school you went to and whether or not you've had an accident, I think that's a little bit beyond the capabilities, but absolutely it's what they should be doing.
Well, you could certainly do it through the insurance companies.
Yes.
Because all the government needs to do is say to the insurance companies, you must record the details of the CBT certificate if they're on L plates.
Yeah. We all know what makes sense, and we all know what is so simple and so obvious, but the government fails so many times. If they don't even know who's in the country and who went abroad yesterday, what is the point of passport control? I mean, it's and then
I think we might be off topic a bit now.
To who's had an accident, they have no.
No, but there are private companies who have to make money out of accidents, and who will keep very, very stringent checks on it.
Yeah. So
Not that I'm in favour of privatising everything, but there are times when it's advantageous.
We could spend a lot of time talking about what doesn't happen that needs to happen completely.
Okay, so last couple on the Q&A, then we'll go on to 2.11. We'll have a bit of discussion about that, and then we're going to go off there. So probably looking at another half an hour, if that's okay with everyone on the panel.
Yep.
Okay. Self says Mrs. B has her wall paint on. Well, you have observed that I have makeup on, so thank you very much.
I must admit, she does look absolutely stunning tonight.
Oh, thanks, babe.
There's no point. There's no quiz tonight.
Yeah, there's no extra points to be had.
I'm not going to say what I think. I'll get chucked off.
Oh, if it's about the spot, I'm well aware of it.
Is there a quiz at the end of this series? Is it going to be a theory test?
Yeah, you've got to pass your theory test. Yeah. Mr. Music says, if I want to get my A license after I've got my A2, I have to pay at least 2 more tests, another 220 quid, I think. So you can see why some people either wait or don't get their full license. Yeah, absolutely.
I think the numbers are wrong. It's a weird one for me because I see the argument the other way around. Because I don't understand why people keep doing the CBT at 100 odd quid a time. Because the test is a total of £114.
Because they don't have the bike with the power to do it, therefore they have to find themselves an instructor who will insist on a couple of hours training, who will then insist on you paying them the couple of hours for the bike and everything else.
But even so, that's still going to be cheaper in the long term than doing your CBT every...
In the long term, probably will be. But
just, you only have to do it twice, don't you?
Whereas you're guaranteed you're going to pass your CBT if you've done it once.
Of course, if you've been riding for 2 years and you can't pass your test, there's some questions to be asked about that, isn't there?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't think, I mean, if there's people out there who continually keep taking their CBT before, the 2-year period, obviously these people are not bothered about passing their test. They're just doing it for convenience rather than wanting to progress and further on in the motorcycle way of things. It just seems like a convenience thing, doesn't it? Just going for your CBT every 15, 16 months or whatever.
And that defeats the purpose.
Convenience, because if you only want to ride a 125 and that's it, you're happy with a 125 as a commuter, should you really be forced to take your CBT every 2 years, or should you be forced to do your theory test and AN other test?
Yeah.
Gives you access to a 125 and that's it, you've got it for life.
I think they should just force you to do your test. After a period, you've got to do your test, and if you do your test on a 125, so be it.
Or just get yourself a 3-wheeler, like having stabilisers.
Oh, brilliant.
There's nothing like Super Robin, mate. You may laugh.
Weggies in traders.
Really?
Yeah.
Robin Reliant. Oh my days.
We've not finished.
Seriously, I'll tell you what happened.
We're
We're
about
not
that
offline yet. Sorry.
Seriously though, the way they've changed the way the tests work, so you don't get a natural progression onto a bigger bike, is what's messed this up.
Yeah.
Because if you did your test on a 125 and then after a couple of years you could get on, I don't know, 300 or something like that, and at least you've got a progression without having to go back and take more tests.
Yeah.
Maybe they should turn it the other way around and say you get a CBT and then you have to do your test, and then to upgrade to a bigger bike is just a check out at the training centre.
But to enforce checking people's licences after that period has passed, you're going to get so many people riding illegally without insurance because they haven't got a CBT. They've passed the time where they're allowed to have another CBT and they just can't be arsed. They ride around anyway.
But you're always going to get that, aren't you?
I was just about to say the same thing, that you're always going to get a certain amount of people that are going to do that, but the majority of people want to ride legally.
I know, I'm just going to throw this out there, but I don't think there should be a CBT. I think you should pass your test, and that's it. I mean, you're on your own. It's just like a car, in a car, obviously in a car you're driving around in a 1-ton flipping killing machine. So obviously you need to pass a test before you can do that on your own. But similarly, with the bike, you're out there on your own, you can kill yourself.
In a
And
tenth of a ton suicide machine.
In order to ride on the road, you should pass a test, the same test that everyone else fucking passes. What's with this? Oh, you can do a CBT and then ride around as a learner on the road on your own and probably cause accidents and kill yourself possibly and everything else.
But from that point, we can go back to how it was back in the early 80s. You know, I mean, it's going back to if you wanted to ride you know, something bigger than a 250, you went and did your test. Okay, and that's what you have to do with a car. You went and got. I was told from an early days, go and get yourself a book, and that was the what do you call it? The science book. What is it?
Highway code.
Highway, yeah, sorry, the highway code.
The sign. Well, there's a couple of signs for you.
Was it up yours? The highway code. And also, to go and get a highway code book. Now, to be quite honest, you probably read half of it, looked at half of it. But going back to what Andy was saying, yeah, the CBT part of it. Why did that all come about? How did it all come about? Because
how many people were dying because they were jumping on bikes with no training whatsoever, and it has been proven to have saved thousands and thousands of lives. So I think doing away with it isn't. But that's not even what we're here to discuss.
No, absolutely not.
That's not an option.
Well, we've got another section, haven't we?
Yeah, we've got the last section to discuss, which is 2.11, which is we acknowledge this may require a culture shift. The public generally view the CBT as a one-day course, and many trainers arrange their business model to deliver CBT on that basis. Trainees need to move away from the idea it's simply completing a day's course will automatically mean that they're fully competent to ride a moped or small motorcycle unaccompanied. This is particularly relevant for young riders, very few of whom go on to take a motorcycle test, a situation which may have been an unintended consequence of the third directive, which limits the size and power of machines that young riders can ride.
Well, I can give you an instance of that. My next door neighbour, he's got 3 boys, and one went through CBT about a year ago, got himself a little scooter, and he rid it around for a year. Then he took his car test. The scooter is gone. He's got no interest in bikes, and he only used it for 1 year. You know, so a lot of youngsters do that. He's not interested in bikes. He just wanted some transport that he could ride, and he couldn't ride a car. So he thinks CBT
absolutely.
Scooter around.
I fully agree with that, Andy, because now my son, he's you know, he's now 17. His scooter I've just sorted out, and he's back on the road for the meantime. But he's now started his driving lessons. He's doing 2-hour driving lessons every week. And as soon as he's got when he does get his car license, he'll just switch over to a car.
Yeah. And
that'll be it. His scooter will probably be sold, mate, and I'll have nothing to do with motorcycles or scooters ever again, to be honest with you.
So, I'm going to put this as a question to the panel then. So, in terms of making the CBT more than a one-day course, but what they're not saying is that it's going to give any more to the person at the end of it. It's just a one-day course to ride a motorbike.
It's what they're going to fill it with. I mean, yeah, you can have a 2-day course or a 2-week course, but what are you going to teach in those 2 days or 2 weeks? Are you going to go out there and say, right, we're now going to do 100 miles for 3 days, and I'm going to watch you and put your rides on what you're doing? Or are they going to just say, right, this first day you're going to be in here, and I'm going to talk you about stuff, and you're still only going to get 2 hours riding?
Yeah, but I think there's still more craft that they can add to it. I mean, if you make it a longer duration for the CBT, there's definitely some more content as far as road safety is concerned. There's a lot more initiative from the theory side that can be put forward. And to be quite honest with you, even some basic maintenance. You know, you're not taught about maintenance on a motorcycle or a scooter, are you, with a CBT? You're not taught anything like that at all.
Well,
and I'm talking about, if I can go back, roadside maintenance, which means if you have a problem on the road for whatever reason, what would you do if you're in this particular scenario? Your bike had broken down, yeah? Give them a few scenarios like a flat, the bike is breaking down for whatever reason. What would you do to get yourself safe, and what would you do to get yourself home? That sort of thing. Just bits and pieces that can add to the whole experience of biking and being safe.
And that does form part of the theory test, to be fair. Depending on which questions that you get, that does form part of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I must admit, during my when I took when I took my test, it was the first year it went into a 2-part test, and the part 1 was, as I said before, very similar to the CBT now, but you had the morning in the classroom and the afternoon on the cone side in the car park, and the schooling that they gave you was a lot like that. It was telling you how the bike works, telling you what you should be looking at, telling you about your chain and what you need to look out for and the right tension and all the rest of that kind of thing. So it's pretty good then.
To be fair, on my CBT, there was far more time spent training me on that than there was on how to use a clutch. And okay, I'm open, but I already knew that shit because I'd already changed chains, sprockets, and done all that kind of stuff. I didn't need that focus. I needed the focus to be on the clutch.
I think what they're saying is, though, if somebody goes for this CBT and they're not confident, they've got to be aware that they could go over, like you did, over to a second day. It's not an automatic, this is a one-day course, you're going to get your ticket at the end of it. It's not going to work that way. You've got to show it. That bloke who's instructing you's got to be quite aware that you're confident before he gives you that ticket. If you're not going to get that ticket on the first day, mate, you're coming back tomorrow or next week, and you're going to do some more hours. And I think that's what they're saying. You've got to be prepared now that it's not going to be 2 hours and a bit of classroom work. It's going to be several days if you need it. And rightly so.
But, yeah, and it's the CBT is not a pass to anything, is it? It's just a vote of confidence from that particular instructor on that particular day, isn't it?
It's training. Richard, what's your thoughts on this? Richard, what's your thoughts on this?
Sorry, I thought you said Keith. Yeah, I mean, again, coming back to the point that it will be a culture change for the training schools. I mean, you could still have your CBT as it was in a day's course, but with the expectation that there might be some extra hours required. I mean, come back and do a CBT again seems pointless.
Yeah.
But come back and do the bits that you need to do. Yeah. Again, it's going to be tricky for the smaller ones because it will force them down a one-on-one route for the additional parts. So that'll increase the costs as well, and there's not enough people coming into bikes as it is. So there's always that concern that you're just going to price people out, because if it becomes as expensive as learning to drive a car, people will just learn to drive a car, won't they? Because it from a purely practical point of view, you're going to get the practicality of a car that you'll never get on a bike. But I think there's a public awareness problem in general. There is an expectation. It was said to me when I went to talk to them about the CBT, oh, well, there's no test. Everyone passes.
Yeah.
It's guaranteed. And that's the bit that people need to understand, that, I would remove the whole concept of it being a day at all.
Yeah.
Why does it have to be a full day? Why can't it be 2 half days or 3 sets of 2 hours or something like that? Again, it's back to tailoring it for the person.
When you're learning to drive a car, you spend an hour lesson each week or each other day or wherever it is with a driving instructor right next to you.
Yeah.
So why? Yeah, exactly the same. Why can't it be like that?
Yeah. I mean, I think we've got to be careful about making it too much at once, because if you're brand new to riding and you go riding for 2 hours, that's a long time for somebody who's never done it before. That's going to be mentally tiring. So if you extend it much further than that in one session, you might be pushing the risk of accidents because people have become too tired to concentrate.
Yeah.
But it's just tailoring it.
Keith, what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, I was just thinking about when I did my training, I went on to do the bike safe. Just wondering whether some aspects of the bike safe could be incorporated into the CBT. I mean, it took longer for me to do the bike safe course than to do the CBT, because there were some classroom sessions,
Yeah.
and you were then assessed by a well, in my case it was an ex-police officer, motorcyclist, who did a good 3-4 hour assessment on me on my riding before he was happy that I could ride safely. You could in some ways incorporate some of that, and that makes it a bit of a longer process. It sort of breaks up into smaller chunks. Because like I said earlier, after my full day, I was completely exhausted at the end of it. I got home and I was absolutely knackered. There's a lot to take in, and like you say, you've been riding possibly the first time ever for a good 2 hours, and you are mentally exhausted. So maybe you could do something similar to bike safe and have it in smaller chunks over a longer period of time, over several weeks, and incorporate some of the learning.
Because the police won't let you do bike safe until you've done your full test.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to wonder what they would say about that.
I'm just, you could do something similar, couldn't you?
An interesting approach.
You got to remember as well that a lot of these kids can't wait. They want to get down to that test and they want to get out on that scooter that night, So to split up too long, would that, frustrate them, and they'd ride the bikes anyway.
But I think if it was the requirement that it would take longer, then, and you knew that, then there shouldn't be any, you shouldn't be any anxiety to get it done quickly. If you knew that it's going to take you 2 or 3 days, and that is how long you've got to wait, and it's as simple as that. You're not going to be able to get it done in a day. You know that you can't possibly get it done in a day. You can only get it done having completed, say, 2 or 3 days worth of training.
Maybe some publicity that said, yes, it is possible to do it in a day, because I don't think they're looking to take that away.
No.
But yes, it's possible to do it in a day, but on average it takes so long, so that people expect it's going to be longer.
Yeah. Or you could say it could take up to 3 days to do it.
Up to a week.
Yeah. Depending on your.
Playing devil's advocate here, there's going to be an awful lot of people that's going to say, hang on a minute, I can't take 3 days off work to come and do this test.
No.
And that's where the CBT training schools need to be flexible and make themselves available outside of office hours.
Yes,
so
I agree with that.
Weekends, which, to be fair, the majority of them do anyway.
But is it the case, though, that that's again a problem with the fact that it's a certificate that you either have or don't? Maybe the problem there is that it should be an assessment of all of the sections of the certificate. Yes. And then if you wanted to do an hour every Saturday for 2 months, you could.
Yeah. That's it. So just finally moving on to Bex. Bex, what's your thoughts on this?
Pretty much the same as what everybody else is saying, really. I mean, like I say, I think it would take the pressure off a lot of people, knowing that you can do it over, a certain amount of days, rather than just saying, try and get it done within a day. And if they didn't charge you extra, or if they charged a higher premium in the first place, but that you could do the training for free after that until you did pass, I think it would take a lot of pressure off people as well.
Yeah.
I'd just like to say, congratulations, Bex, on getting your licence.
Thank you.
What can you, not knowing too much about your Bex, what are you licensed to ride now? Have you got a full licence to ride?
Definitely know how old you are, Bex.
Yeah, I've got a full licence. Yeah.
Full licence to ride.
Yeah, I did my CBT, and then the day after I went straight onto. Well, I did another hour on a 125, and then I went straight onto the 600.
And she has a very tidy and amazingly clean box of racks and stuff.
Very handy.
All very handy.
Yeah.
Those racks look like they've never been used to me.
It's her latest video. She's showing it what she's got in a box, and everything is spotlessly clean. It looks like it hasn't been used on anything.
It's definitely been used. Look at the muck-off. It's nearly empty, one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Just going back to this subject of 2.11, final thought might be a little bit left of field, but just for consideration, as we move on to some of the later sections of this document as we do other hangouts in further weeks. As a nurse, when you train to be a nurse, you get your qualification, and then you put on a register of registered nurses. Then, if you want to be a nurse trainer, as it were, to sign off student nurses as competent, you have to do an additional qualification. And then if that student that you've signed off is then found to be actually not competent, you will be hauled in front of your regulatory body. So something that I would consider proposing is that people who sign people off as being safe and giving them a CBT, that they are then responsible for that person to a certain degree. So if that person does something, if they kill themselves, if they kill another person, that whoever signed them off as being safe and giving them their CBT should be held jointly responsible or partially responsible.
I can see that being the assessors are going to be having to videotape everybody so that in a court they can go, at this point in time when this person took this, this is how he rode and he was perfectly competent. At the point when he left afterwards, he decided to do wheelies down the road and step into a car, he was not, but he wasn't being assessed at that time. So that's
would that not make sure that everyone giving compulsory basic training covered every single one of the fucking points that they needed to cover?
I think it might make sure that people doing the CBT, actually provide the CBTs, refuse to train anybody under the age of 40. Most people over the age of 40 as well, to be honest.
And how long would you be responsible for that person? How long would you be responsible from that person when he left the test centre or the training centre?
For 2 years until they took their
2 years.
It's the same as the MOT on your car. The MOT lasts for 12 months, but it states that it's only valid, really, the moment it leaves the garage. If something goes wrong 5 minutes down the road, it then becomes invalid, even though you passed your test 5 minutes ago. So it is a very tricky situation. It's really down to the rider.
That's all down to the user then after that, isn't it? It's the same with post MOT and post test. It's all down to that particular user to maintain not only their vehicle but themselves as a user of the road.
It's about people taking responsibility. I don't actually think you can compare it to a nurse, because let's face it, how long does it take to train to be a nurse? 4 or 5 years?
3 years.
3 years?
What I'm saying is, okay, that's a little bit extreme, but what I'm trying to say is, if you hand off some of that responsibility for the person on the bike to the person that trained them, to say that, do you know what, if this person wraps themselves around a tree or is doing wheelies down the road, then you're going to have to stand up in court in front of the coroner and say, do you know what, I did train them on this, I did tell them not to do wheelies down the road.
I personally think, imagine if there's any one of us, we're in the position that we're an instructor, and because we all know, and we're all experienced riders, I don't think that any one of us, if we see some plum come along on a scooter and he was falling all over the place, he didn't know how to use his brakes, wasn't stopping and starting in the right place, and he just looked unsteady on the road, there's no way in hell, I don't think any one of us as an instructor would give him a CBT certificate.
And therefore, if someone that you did give a CBT certificate to did something stupid, you'd have no qualms about saying, do you know what, I genuinely believe that person was safe. I've got nothing on my conscience for this.
Exactly. I think if you were to impose something like that, I think overnight people would just stop doing CBTs and say, you know what, it's not worth the risk. I'm not risking my reputation on somebody for one day. On that particular day, I've said that person is competent.
Because then you'll become responsible for them after the action.
Yeah,
I mean,
and you're taking away the responsibility. The person themselves taking responsibility for their own actions and going on and being sensible about it. That's what you're doing. You're taking away their responsibility and giving it to somebody else. And I think overnight people would say, you know what, forget it. It's just not worth it. It's not viable. And it's not worth the risk.
I wouldn't want to take on the responsibility for making sure a 16-year-old doesn't do something stupid, because we've all been 16, and I'm pretty sure We all did stupid things.
Let's be honest, Richard. Don't stop at 16.
Don't stop
No, no. I'm not sure when it stops, so I'll let you know when it does.
I can assure you, even at my age, it doesn't stop. Even at my age, it doesn't stop. Trust me.
There are so many instructors that don't cover the basic syllabus, never mind the additions that have been suggested, that making them take some responsibility to prove, and it comes in later in the legislation, in the proposed changes, is that I do think there needs to be a slight change in emphasis, not necessarily a change in how it currently is, but the emphasis needs to be changed so that the responsibility, there is some responsibility on the instructor to say that, you know what, you passed this person, you said they were safe, prove it.
I'd personally like to think that the responsibility is already there. I really would, because at the end of the day, most of these instructors are probably all fathers like ourselves, and to be quite honest with you, I wouldn't want to be instructing a 17-year-old pretty much as a kid, to be quite honest with you, on a scooter, and then give them a certificate, just thinking to yourself, well, that was an easy 100 quid, you know, and just letting him go down the road thinking to myself, Jesus Christ, and going home at night thinking, I wish I hadn't done that.
Yeah.
I would not want to carry that guilt.
Yeah, there is.
And what you've got to think about is that, you know, I gave the example earlier of the horror story one of my instructors told me of the lad who'd been out for 2 hours total.
Yeah.
His total CBT took 2 hours. He was charged £140 for it. And at the end of it, he said to his mum, "Mum, you've got me a bike, but I don't want to go out on it because
Really?
I don't even know how to ride it. But I've got my CBT, so legally I can."
But you know, the same argument could apply when you've completed your mod 2, because you could theoretically go on any bike. You know, you could go on a BMW S1000RR and then immediately kill yourself. Are you then going to say to the instructor, "You're now responsible for that idiot bloody killing himself"? Where's he going to stop? You know.
Andy scratched my bike.
Andy scratched your bike. Yeah. You know, people themselves have to take some responsibility for their own actions. And I think once you start taking that responsibility off people.
If you can prove that you've trained them in roadcraft, in positioning, how to ride a bike safely,
you can't train them in attitude.
No,
that's where
say I'm not giving
sensibility.
CBT because your attitude sucks.
Absolutely.
That's where I said
would.
that they're going to have to video them every single session that they do to prove that they did train them properly.
But do they not do that already?
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think the
could make a few quid
CBT
if
should be
it's
there to tell people this is how you ride, and to say to them you must start taking responsibility for your own actions.
Yeah.
That's what happens. If you're travelling too close to a vehicle and he stops, you're going to hit him. Not the instructor who trained him, who trained you how to hit him, but you are. Even when you did your training, you were 5 foot further back.
It's not my fault, Governor. It's the instructor.
Yeah, he actually told me I should have hit him in a different way.
Only go for the soft tops.
BMW.
It's an interesting concept, but I think once you start doing it, you're taking people's responsibility off them, and that's wrong. You've got to take your own responsibility and for your own actions. Otherwise, you know, you're kind of handing it to other people, and you'll just find other people say, you know what, it's just not worth the risk. Why should I take on responsibility for other people's actions?
It's strange how it relates to other risks, though, isn't it? Because now in this country, you can ride a bike at 16, you can drive a car at 17, but you can't smoke until you're 18. So are we giving people responsibility for themselves?
And on that philosophical note,
do you want me to tell a bum joke?
No, I'd like to thank everyone who's joined the panel tonight for what I found a really interesting debate about the CBT and the proposed changes to it, and hopefully we'll continue these on a Sunday evening. We've got lots and lots to get through in terms of the proposal, and then following that I'm going to write a formal response back to the government and point them to these hangouts as a point of reference. So hopefully we can get something sensible together. And
Yes.
everyone tonight has raised some really great points, and I thank you each and every one for them. So thank you for taking time out of your busy lives to come and join us.
Can I just give you a statistic before we go? The last statistics that were made for safety on motorbikes and people killed on motorbikes, now this seems daft because we're in 2015, but the newest figures that came out were 2012, right, for deaths on bikes, and the deaths on bikes have dropped in 2012 by 9%. So this thing about people being killed on bikes, there's less people being killed on bikes now than there was before.
But is that proportionate to the number of bikers? Are there less bikers now?
No, I just said 9% drop in 2012 of bikers being killed, and that was the last figures. Seems daft that it's 12 and we're in 15, but that is the latest government figures saying there's a 9% drop in bike fatalities in this country.
That's how long it takes them to trawl through the figures.
How long it takes them.
What I would question on that one is how many bikers there were the year previous compared to the year that the taken, and whether that's proportionate to the drop.
I don't know.
Another statistic to add to that: 1 in 5 of the bikers that are killed are between the ages of 16 and 19.
Yeah.
Which is the age that the CBT should matter the most.
Yeah.
Well, just to raise a point on that, just one thing a few years ago, do you know what? The most prone to have an accident, believe it or not, apart from the teenagers, was actually the what they used to class as the born-again bikers, like myself.
The 40-year-olds.
They're still the second highest group, Weggy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I come back after 16 years. I had my kids, and the family grew up and that, and I got straight back on his heads at R11, so I'm quite safe.
Yeah, well, they're not that fast, are they? So.
It doesn't matter what bike I'm on, I'm not safe at all.
Well, yeah, no, if you leave the disc lock on, there's going to be an accident, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, it's better than trying to rotate your front wheel on a centre stand.
Can't argue with that one.
No, can't argue.
I'm just going to go to the panel and ask everyone to say goodnight, and then we're going to go off air. So I'm going to start with Bex. Bex, thanks ever so much for joining us. Would you like to say goodnight?
Thank you for having me on here, and good night, everybody.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Bex. And Keith?
I just want to say I take no responsibility for anyone's actions following this hangout. And good night.
Thank you, Keith. And Richard?
See ya.
Thank you, Richard. Andy?
Me?
Yes, you are.
Oh, okay. Good night, everybody. Hope you took some sense out of this, because I did.
Weggy?
Yeah, it's been quite an experience, actually. I've been listening all night. I know I come on sort of fairly late, but it's been quite a good debate, to be honest with you. It's a fairly serious matter. But I will just add one thing that's sort of slightly off topic. Always check your insurance policies, because tonight I just literally bought an XJ600 for work. And I got it insured yesterday through Bennett's, and I checked my downloaded policy on the internet tonight, and I'm actually insured for an Nissan Micra in white from 1991. Because they missed one number off my registration plate, so I thought, hold on a minute. So I checked it on the registration checker, and yes, a Nissan Micra. So I'm in the fucking morning get it installed, but just goes to show, always check your insurance policies. Yeah.
Apart from that, some Thursday. Thanks for that, Weggy.
Imagine modifying a Nissan Micra to an XJ6.
And Dave?
Good night, everybody, and good night to Her Majesty's government. Do something constructive, not detrimental.
Thank you, Dave. I'm also going to say good night on behalf of the Yorkshire Biker, or Ethan. Thank you for joining us, Ethan. I appreciate you were very tired. But thank you for joining us for the time that you did. And Mr. B, would you like to say good night?
Q&A after that?
Yes.
Okay then. Well, thanks for tuning in. Sorry, it's kind of a little bit on impromptu.
We were a bit late.
We're a bit late because obviously Mrs. B's birthday, Mother's Day and everything else. But thanks for tuning in, and next week will be far more organised and probably more advertised as well.
Yes, indeed. Just to finish off on the Q&A, we've got Nev C saying, "Good day, fellow motor vloggers." Good day, Nev.
I know.
Good day.
Good day.
Learn to Ride Videos is asking how I'm getting on with my training. There will be some news on that. Mr. B's bought me my DAS for my birthday, so there will be videos to follow. Probably going to be serialised after I've done my DAS, and we'll release them as a series of videos so that you can find out how I got on. And lastly, Biz says, when I was 16, 26 years ago, if I remember correctly, I had a provisional car licence, got my first bike, a 50cc Suzuki.
Yeah, AB50, come on. Yeah.
And rode it without any formal training, which, if my maths is correct, that is pre-1990, therefore you wouldn't have had to have done the CBT. So you are correct. And that just leaves me to say good night, everybody. Thanks ever so much for watching. If you've got any thoughts or comments on the consultation document, there is a link to it below the Hangout. So if you want to have a read through it and put any thoughts on the section that we've covered today, which is section 2, or any of the sections that we're going to look at in later Hangouts, please feel free. And if you want to join the Hangouts for later discussions, give us a shout and we'll make sure you've got a link to join the panel. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you again. Night-night.
No.